appropriate. We now take item 2, which is apologies for absence and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Elliot Jays, who is substituted by Councillor Richard Palmer, from Councillor James Hall, who is substituted by Councillor Derek Carnell, and also from Councillor Richard Darby. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now take item 3, which is to approve the minutes of the meeting held.
Chair, there's an apology just come up on the Teams chat from Councillor Bowen.
From?
Councillor Bowen, he had hoped to attend, but
yes, I'll be announcing that at a later point in the meeting. Thank you. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of May 2022. Minute numbers 771 to 778 is a correct record. Members, do you agree? Thank you very much indeed. Item 4 is for me to invite members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. Do I have any? Oh, yes. Apologies, members. I've also got the adjourned minutes for the reconvened planning meeting as well. And so can I have your indulgence on those to take as read? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So disclosable pecuniary interest, members. Disclosable non-pecuniary interests.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
I'd like to declare on 2.3, which is Burnt Wicket, the Street Up Church, and 2.6 Woodland Farm, Newington. It's under paragraph 4.3, where a reasonable-minded person, having considered the facts, may consider that as predetermination. I have made public comments on both applications, and I feel that I would like to speak as well, both as ward member on both, but during the proceedings, I will leave the chamber to remove that doubt of predetermination from the applicants. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 5, which is the planning working group, and it's to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of June 2022. And once again, members, those that attended, can I have your signification that they're acceptable? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And of course, the applicant has amended the proposals on that one, so the site at the site meeting, and the proposal will be amended and brought forward to a subsequent meeting. Item 6 is to consider deferred items, and the first one of those on our list is 21/502/609 out, and that's land to the east of Linstead Lane, Linstead, Kent. And I'll thank the officer for an update and an outline of that particular application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a short update to this one, and that's since the committee report was written, there's been 2 further objections received, which raised concerns related to the parking survey, additional movements on the highway network being underrepresented, increased pollution, the number of parking spaces proposed for the dwellings, potential future plans for further development, and issues relating to construction vehicles accessing the site. I consider all of these points are addressed by virtue of the reports and the appraisal within and the conditions in front of members, and as such have no further comments to make on those points. In terms of the scheme itself, members are likely familiar with the details at this point, but for the avoidance of doubt, this application seeks outline planning permission for up to 10 units on land to the east of Linstead Lane, which is indicatively shown on the screen. Detailed permission is sought for the access from Linstead Lane, with appearance, landscaping, layout and scale being reserved matters for future consideration if planning permission is granted. In summary, in light of the council's lack of a 5-year supply of housing sites, and as a result of the view of the independent highway consultant, officers remain of the view that the proposal represents sustainable development lying close to existing services and facilities, and recommend that planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Julian Speed to speak on this item, please? Can you do that, Paul? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Linstead Lane, by reason of restricted width, poor alignment and substandard junction with London Road, is considered unsuitable as a means of access to the proposed development. The existing road network in the vicinity of the site has insufficient capacity. Not my words, that's KCC, objecting to houses on the west side of the lane, yet they don't object when it's on the opposite side. They've been hoodwinked by developers pretending they only want to build 10 houses when we know they plan 50. The highways case is flawed. A road safety audit based on one site visit in the summer holidays, no traffic counting, a parking survey undertaken at midnight on one weekday and one Sunday, non-compliant with the Lambeth methodology. No attempt made to survey what happens during the day when people from surrounding villages park in the lane to visit shops and services on the A2. Delivery vans, buses and HGVs then cause total gridlock. Real-world conditions ignored in favour of selective evidence. Displacing parking further south on the Blind Bend is a serious loss of amenity to residents no longer to park outside their own homes. Those from nearby villages without convenient parking will drive to Faversham instead. Tenham's already seen 30 businesses closed since 1998. This would tip more over the edge. There's no active travel option. Local primary schools are full. No secondary school. The one remaining GP relocating to Sittingbourne. KCC axing every bus route in Linstead. The train station a long walk and a lousy service. It's a recipe for more cars and more pollution. The site is located outside the settlement boundary of Tenham. These boundaries don't have fuzzy edges. Policy DM31 makes clear farmland development will only be permitted when there's overriding need that cannot be met on land within the built-up area boundaries. Development on BMV land, which this is, will not be permitted unless it's allocated for development by the local plan, which it isn't, or where there's no alternative site on land of lower grade. There are brownfield sites for 10 houses. Policy ST3, at locations in the open countryside outside the built-up area boundaries, development will not be permitted unless supported by national planning policy and able to demonstrate it would contribute to protecting and enhancing the countryside. So this plan is contrary to local policy, but also national policy. NPPF Chapter 16, Para 201 states, consent should be refused unless harm is necessary to achieve public benefits that outweigh that harm. 10 expensive houses offer no benefits, only disbenefits to the Linstead Lane community. They ruin the setting of 3 Grade 2 listed buildings and close an important local countryside gap. The lack of a 5-year supply does not mean houses should be built in the wrong place. The tilted balance is not engaged here. At the last committee, you voted unanimously against this application. Nothing whatsoever has changed since, and I urge you to reject it again on the wide range of breaches to local and national policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Jacqueline Langdon Bassett, please, to speak on this item?
I speak today for the residents of Linstead Lane who live near the London Road and vehemently oppose the planning application for these 10 houses. They would immediately increase the flow of traffic, which is already at high capacity, by at least 20 cars. The majority of houses these days are a 2-car family and many have even more. These will be cars leaving and returning between 2 and possibly 8 times a day, turning in and out of this very narrow lane. As residents, our homes are constantly invaded by fumes from idling cars, lorries, buses and industrial vehicles that are caught in traffic jams trying to pass parked cars and huge earth-moving lorries that thunder up and down the lane, using it as a rat run from Lenham to Tong and the new houses being built in Batchard. We're not happy with the idea of a give-way sign 55 metres from the busy A2. Those travelling north to join the A2 will be expected to take a gamble on whether the traffic will arrive from the A2, as there is no line of sight on which to judge safe movement. We will have more idling and stop-start noise and emission pollution right underneath our front windows. This is an area immediately adjacent to an AQMA. Building more houses will add to the already heavy parking which occurs in the lower part of the lane. Restricting parking here will push residents further up, making us park on a dangerous blind bend. I speak for myself and others who come home late at night in the dark, the wet and the cold. I will have to park away from my property in a deserted area, opposite fields, sometimes having to carry heavy bags. This makes for a feeling of vulnerability and worry for my safety. Who is in those fields, behind those bushes? This loss of amenity is an unreasonable imposition by the developers. Drivers from surrounding villages will also be confronted by long walks down Linstead Lane for goods and services. But the evidence from the A2 shows that people would rather break the law on yellow boxes and double yellow lines than walk 10 metres, let alone 200 metres. I also ask you to look at the bigger picture. 10 houses are being applied for, but the developer's submission to the local plan consultation makes clear they intend to build 50. 10 houses, 20 cars, 50 houses, 100 cars, plus travelling multiple times throughout the day. We feel the developers have deliberately only applied for 10 at this stage to avoid the extra scrutiny that 50 would be subjected to. Residents believe it's a cynical ploy to set a precedent for future developments off the new access road that will cause even wider harms to us and to local businesses who will lose footfall from surrounding villages. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Sam Sykes, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, this application has been made by Eden Real Estate, a small company operating across the South East. Eden Real Estate took a proactive approach working with your planning officers through the determination process to inform the proposals. Taking your officers' advice, a small development of up to just 10 sensitively considered dwellings has been proposed on this site. Set within a sustainable location in the settlement of Tenham, the site has excellent connectivity to local schools, shops, services and the wider bus, road and rail network. The site is located in a highly sustainable location, and as set out by your officers, there are no overriding concerns from officers or technical statutory consultees. We welcome and agree with your officers' repeated recommendation for approval. At the previous committee, members resolved to undertake independent highway advice to inform decision making. The recently produced Project Centre report commissioned by the Council has demonstrated that the scheme is acceptable in highway terms. Concerns around road safety, parking provision, road widths, bus routes and junction capacity have all been addressed to the satisfaction of your independent consultants. Members should therefore be comforted that the Council's independently commissioned highway consultant is in agreement with the applicant's highway consultants and that the scheme is appropriate and acceptable in highway terms. We would reiterate that in addition to this, Kent County Council and Swale Borough Council officers are also agreed that the application is acceptable. We would take this opportunity also to remind members that the scheme will deliver significant benefits to the provision of family housing through a discreet and sensitively considered approach. The proposed dwellings can be designed sympathetically, respecting local character, whilst meeting high sustainability credentials. Planting can be accommodated within the site, particularly on boundaries to reduce visual impact and retain the rural character of Linstead Lane. The proposed development is considered to result in a low to neutral impact in visual terms once landscaping is established. Your officers have recommended approval and in doing so have noted the multiple benefits of the scheme. There are few constraints to the site and consultees are of the view that there would not be any adverse impacts. We support your officers' view that the proposals are acceptable in line with the development plan and the MPPF and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. On this basis, we respectfully request that members support the officer recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we've now got ward members that would normally be speaking. I've been contacted by ward member Councillor Bowen, who unfortunately can't be with us this evening. He doesn't mind me sharing the fact that he has contracted COVID. and that's why he can't be with us. He can't speak remotely either because of the impact on his voice and so on. But again, he did reiterate his opposition to the scheme. And on that basis now, I've got Councillor Mike Whiting, the ward member, and I invite you to speak on this one, Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful. I'm also, what I say also on behalf of Councillor Bowen, having discussed it with him. It is very disappointing that officers have brought this application back to the committee after members voted unanimously against it last time. In my view, the new highways technical note doesn't meet members' previous concerns. We know that KCC Highways objected to a proposed development on the other side of the Linstead Lane. I believe those objections apply equally to this application. Yes, this is for 10 homes, but as we have heard, the end game may be for as many as 50. If that is the end game, then surely it would fail the test of prematurity, given where we are with the new local plan. This development is in totally the wrong place. Any reasonable and objective assessment reveals the real world harms to our community that it will cause. And Linstead Lane, Chairman, is a community in its own right, one that's evolved over centuries in keeping with the historic pattern of ribbon development. That community will have the amenity value of convenient and safe parking torn from it. Under the highway proposals, residents and their visitors, as we've heard, will have to drive 200 metres south along Linstead Lane, past 2 blind bends, simply to park their cars. Where delivery vans will safely park is anyone's guess. Mr. Chairman, I believe, as do the residents, that the proposed changes to the highways are based on false assumptions about parking behaviour of residents and visitors and the volumes of traffic in Linstead Lane. The placement of giveaway signs, for example, at the narrowing of the lane fails to meet the criticism that drivers will have no line of sight to oncoming traffic. Members, you can't give way to traffic that you cannot see. In my view, Mr. Chairman, this half-baked traffic scheme will increase the threat to road users, causing backup onto the A2, creating congestion in the ACMA, as we've heard. Residents from surrounding villages use what parking spaces there are to access goods and services along the A2. If they cannot park as they do now in the lane, then they will likely shop elsewhere. Shops on the A2 are already struggling. The only GP in the village is relocating to the Memorial, affecting thousands of patients. Local bus and local rail services are in decline. Ask yourself, members, will footfall from 10 new homes reverse all of this? Of course it won't. Will we see fewer cars on the road? Of course we won't. And Linstead Lane will get busier as a result. As shown in the 200+ submissions, just about every interest in this community is harmed for the sake of just 10 new houses. That harm far outweighs the public benefit of this development. Mr. Chairman, in closing, the last time you considered this application, one member in voting against said, "This is the easiest planning decision I've ever made." I hope all members will follow that lead and vote for refusal this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Members, anybody wishing to speak on this one? Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did attend the site meeting. I see under 2.11, they are saying they will extend the, or put double yellow lines, or extend double yellow lines to try and basically solve the problem of the parking along there and put a pavement in. But I'm going on to say that I have grave concerns about the visibility of the access road to this development of 10 houses if this was to be passed tonight. It is a grave concern of mine. It's a narrow road lane, I think that's all been explained by one of the speakers. And in the winter, it's a rural area with fog, mist. So I have reservations myself on that point of road safety, whether I'm going to be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm obviously I've not taken part in this discussion before. I'm only standing in tonight, but funny enough, I was at when it was originally heard because I was speaking on another application and I had concerns then. And in fact, what I've heard tonight and what I've read doesn't alleviate them concerns. I think, as was highlighted by the chair of the parish council, there seems to be saying that because we don't have a 5-year supply, we need to overrun and ignore our development policies. Well, that's not quite correct. The courts have quite often backed and stated that the development policies may well override the tilted balance if you don't have a 5-year supply. So I don't see that as a main reason for refusal, but I don't think this is a sustainable development in that area for various reasons that were given by the speakers. There's lack of school places, there's no GP. If you don't have the infrastructure, don't put the housing in. I live in Newington and I see Newington as a mirror image of Tenham at times. We have a poor bus service, we have a train station which has a limited service, the same as Tenham, and we both have an air quality management area stuck right in the middle of the village. And I feel that adding to this does not mitigate, but will increase and add to the air quality. And in the ruling at Pond Farm at Newington, it was made quite clear that if you're going to have development in an air quality or next to an air quality management area, they must show what measures they're going to put in place to reduce the impact on air quality. And I don't see this in this application at all. And even as mentioned, there's nothing to do with active travel or anything like that. So I'm open-minded at the moment, but I think the arguments that I've heard that was put by the chair and the lady speaker, the ward members, I don't feel I can support this as it stands at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. And let's start with why we're here. First and foremost, we're here because we said no last time around, and we said no because we didn't believe the highways report that we had. We didn't trust it. Let's face it, none of us probably, we still don't trust it, but we cannot utilise that as a reason for objection going forward, given that we now have KCC and an independent highways report telling us that it is acceptable. We might not believe that, but we can't rely on that, because if we go to appeal, all that will happen is that the inspector will rule against us and they'll award costs for us being unreasonable. And you can perfectly well understand that. I still have serious concerns, like Councillor Palmer, around whether this really is a sustainable location going forward, given the cuts to bus services, given the lack of a GP in town, given the lack of other facilities going forward. If we can find a reason, and it has to be a legitimate reason that would stand up, then yes, we could refuse. But we have to make sure that it is on a sound planning reason, so that we are not putting this council at risk of high awards of costs against us at an appeal. I'll listen to the debate to see if anyone can come up with such a reason.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Valentine, please.
Okay, in paragraph 2.9, there's discussion of the priority shuttle system. I'd be grateful if the planning officer could show us maps and talk us through how that's going to work. Just before that, though, the comment I make on the new traffic report we've got is that it doesn't consider the junction of Linstead Lane with the A2 at all. All the maps stop, before you get to the A2. And it's that, as the chair of the parish council pointed out, that's a very narrow entrance and it's very poorly aligned with the A2. It's going to be even narrower after having a footpath added down the east side. So I have grave concerns that we're not going to get gridlock. You know, when a bin lorry meets a bus coming down there, I don't see how there is going to be a function at all. But the planning officer can convince me otherwise.
Well, I'll explain how the priority shuttle system works. That's on the screen in front of you. As you can see, once you turn off the A2 and south onto Linstead Lane, southbound traffic has priority right of way going through this section where the road narrows to only allow one car through. And then to the south here, there's a area there where the vehicle moving north waits as the southbound vehicle has the right of way. And obviously when there is no car coming down, then they can proceed through.
So how does the northbound vehicle see that it's clear right up to the A2? There's no line of sight on that.
I can't see what's blocking the way there. They're
But what
waiting.
the problem is, the A2 isn't on that map either.
It's up here. There's the A2 there.
Yeah. Well, you haven't shown the A2, have you? You map it up to the, perhaps up to the junction, but you can see that's not a straight line. And if you're travelling west along the A2 and you're going to turn left down Linstead Lane, how does a car at that position know that there's a bus or a bin lorry coming down?
No, all I can add at this point is that it's been assessed by KCC and the independent highway consultant.
But they haven't talked about the junction with the A2 at all in that report.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay. All I can say is that they haven't raised an objection in regards to that. Okay.
Chairman, Chairman, this is Jim Wilson here. Is it possible for me to, just to sort of clarify the terms of the work by the project centre? As you know, they've done the 2 reports, both of which are appended, and the conclusion of the second report, which is page 52 of the agenda, I think that's helpful. And you'll note paragraph 3.1 on page 52 and the 3 bullet points, the first of which says the scheme is considered compliant with relevant national and local highway policy. So my interpretation of that is they've looked at the application in the round and its implications, obviously very well aware of the proximity to the A2, and they've decided that it's acceptable. So, I mean, my advice to members would be that, you know, they should accept that the highway implications have been very, very carefully considered and found to be acceptable. I mean, in saying that, I sort of appreciate that, you know, there's been a challenge to it, but that, as I think at least one of the members has suggested, is the expert advice we have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Rolls, please.
Thank you, Chair. I know the village very well, having lived there for 10 years. Since my time in the 80s and 70s, it's got worse. The A2 has got worse. I'm finding it very difficult to accept that this road can take any more traffic. And I would find it very difficult to vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. People may be aware I wasn't on the committee when this was first discussed, so I don't know the background too well, although I've read the current reports very carefully. I think we do need to bear in mind what Councillor Martin has already said, that if we wish successfully to object to a planning application, we have to have good reason for it. I do just wonder, in regard to the independent traffic report that this council asked for, what specification we gave the consultation company in terms of what they were going to look at. And so I would ask if any of our officers know what we said to them, and did it include the junction with the A2? Because if they commented including that junction, then it's very difficult to refuse on those grounds. But if we didn't ask them to look at the junction, then that would be another matter. I think the question of how many houses is not really a basis for making a decision, because the plan clearly says up to 10 residential dwellings. If at some excuse me, if at some future time somebody came up with the bright idea of putting 50 there, it would then be a completely different proposal and clearly would be 5 times less acceptable. There is one area, though, in reading all of this for the first time, that I retain concern about, and that's the question of pedestrian access to the houses. There is a proposal for a pavement along Linstead Lane, but there is also the question of a pedestrian right of way through a, I think it's a carpentry business rather than the builder's business, which is between the houses and the A2. And I'd like to understand what the position is of that to see whether it's acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, could you help us with that?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of your first point about the remit for the independent highway consultant, that was to assess the application against the relevant national and local highway policies. And also there was a specific question about how this development would impact upon the bus routes, because that was something which was set out in the resolution. So they've done that, and they've, as my colleague Mr. Wilson said, they've concluded that the proposal is compliant with local and national highway policies. In terms of your query about the pedestrian right of way and the footpath, again, you're right. There's 2 proposed access routes. One of those being what is an existing private right of way which goes through the joinery business, and the alternative, well, the second route is the proposed footpath along Linstead Lane. As per, this is mentioned in the update report in paragraph 2.11. Essentially, that private right of access that exists, if members were minded to approve the application, then and they were unhappy with that access going through the joinery yard, then there's the option to amend the condition which references that access to ensure that future residents of the development are deterred from taking that route and would instead go down Linstead Lane.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Could the officer just point out again where the countryside gaps are around Tenham?
Don't have a drawing to hand, but this development isn't in the countryside gap.
Right, thank you. I've listened carefully to some of the comments, and there was I think a comment from the applicant that this has been designed carefully. I do have a problem with that because this is an outline application where we will get later on details about landscaping, road layout and parking with only access being sought. This obviously runs adjacent to a rural lane. I do know this particular area quite well. What I know is from the rural lane, it is quite a steep embankment stroke hedgerow that this will be coming out of. I can't get an understanding of how that new access, will we be losing hedgerow, native hedgerow, and how that will impact the effect on the rural lane there. It is a very tight area. I do drive through there quite often. The A2 is frequently dug up, and effectively a load of traffic ends up being forced through the rural lanes to try and bypass where it's being dug up. Quite often that traffic's tailed back down Linstead Lane and trying to get in or out of there, especially with cars parked on the side of the road there. And I hear what you say about this sort of waiting system, but with the sharp bend before it, it is an exceedingly difficult area to navigate. And I think anything with a large vehicle. So I have a concern there we have to, as a committee, think about design. So I've concerns around design, and I don't have fleshed out anything to reassure me about how that landscaping will be considered. Now, whilst we can't, that's for a later date, it's difficult to make a decision on this because it is so integral to the site setup. The other thing is about tilted balance, and I read about the officers and the tilted balance. And I suppose is, do we look at this in the perspective through the telescope of this 10 houses? Will that push us into a 5-year supply, and what difference will it make? And I think in the grand scheme of things, over 5 years, 10 houses is a really small proportion. It does nothing, in my mind, to contribute towards affordable housing. It has an impact on, I feel, residential amenity for those neighbours that are nearby. And I have a huge concern about the pedestrian access, which was previously mentioned by a member. And I certainly would like to see a condition, if it is approved, that that is not to be used as a pedestrian access thoroughfare for this development. But that, in a way, undermines the sustainability of this development, because we're saying it's sustainable. We know KCC, at the moment, we are told that this is a sustainable location because effectively there's a train station and there's a GP surgery. We know the GP surgery is moving. It's going to be gone for at least the best part of, I should imagine, 3 years at a guesstimate, knowing the speed at which our NHS partners work at. We also know the axe is going to possibly be swung over these bus services. So we could end up in a position where we don't have the transport, we don't have the healthcare infrastructure, whilst we do have some retail there. It does, to my mind, concern me greatly that we should be making a decision ahead of finding out. If we then find out the bus services are all axed, then I think that has an impact. And we're asking people to walk along a pavement here, so we would be forcing all pedestrian access along this second pavement along Linstead Lane. That is exceedingly narrow, the existing pavement. I can't in my mind settle comfortably the fact of having what is a relatively short stretch of pavement, but the officer's welcome to come back.
Yeah, was there a specific question? I've got a question about the hedgerow.
Yeah, I think it's really around the design of the rural lane and the impact of the whatever's developed there on that.
Yeah, okay. So a section of the hedgerow is proposed to be removed to allow for the visibility displays from the main access. As a result, there's going to be a replacement scheme of landscaping, which is indicatively shown on this drawing on the screen. This has been assessed by a number of consultees, but importantly KCC Ecology, who are of the view that the replacement scheme will provide a net gain in terms of biodiversity, and there's a specific condition which is recommended that requires a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain. So although the answer to the question is yes, there is hedgerow proposed to come out, officers are satisfied that the replacement scheme will be an improvement.
Is that net gain just along the access, or is that across the whole estate?
Yes, site-wide.
Site-wide?
Yeah.
I still have a concern because I can't see, obviously that's just a flat plan, I can't see in terms of their landscaping, the height profile, because if you're making it more visible for traffic to come out of there, what is a very high-sided lane effectively at the moment and narrow, you're going to completely change that landscaping. So it's not just the chunk where the road is, it's the bit that takes you, gives you that visibility display, and also the additional pavement, presumably.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think last time we went over a lot of different things. I think new things are being brought up now, but the main 2 points that we looked at obviously were highways and the footpath going across the site. Highways, we've got nowhere to go with it. We've got our own traffic consultants saying there's no problem. The A2, we can say that it hasn't been looked at, but if we go back and ask those traffic consultants if they've looked at the A2, the answer will be yes. In the first the appendix 1 that we've got on page 24, it says that PCL staff did a site visit. If you go to the site visit, they will see that there's the A2 is there, and they would have considered that when they are making these comments. If it was a desk-based one where they hadn't even looked, then that may be questionable. But the fact they've been to site, I don't think we can argue that point. If we did refuse it on highway grounds and we go to appeal, we would need to get a highway consultant involved, I would say, to fight our case, as we have done with other appeals. And we can't exactly go to the consultant we use that have already told us that they can't refuse it on those grounds. So I think we've got nowhere to go on highways grounds. There's been mention about the development policies that we've got and that it could be turned down on that. Yes, we don't have a 5-year supply, and we have had to appeal one dwelling overturned appeal because we haven't got a 5-year supply. The fact that this is 10 gives that even greater weight to add to that, even though it is a small number. So I think we will have difficulty there. And even then, with our local policies, our local plan is about to run out, and could probably even argue it run out back in April. So the weight then, when we start looking at the tilted balance, also sort of tips it more in favour of development. So we are stuck in that way and do need to consider that. At the same time, we've looked at the local plan review, and this whole area was within that area where development should be taken forward in the Reg 19, and especially this plot of land, I think, was in the Schlar and came forward as deliverable and available. So I think, again, we're going to have a hard time trying to now say that this area can't come forward, whether it's the 10 houses or the full amount. The air quality area, that was in the last report on page 78, paragraph 8.29, where our officers said the conclusions of the AQA show that the air quality results in the area fall below the national air quality objectives. Inquired about possibly seeking developer contributions towards sustainable transport, but KCC Highways took the view that given the small scale of the scheme, the contribution is not required. So again, our officers have looked at this, tried to get something from it, but that hasn't gone anywhere. And then they sort of go through to say that recommended the welcome pack to new residents as provide new residents to advise sustainable alternative travel options, and then that has been included as a condition. So our own environmental officers have no concern on the air quality grounds. So looking at all those, I can't see that there is any reason that we can refuse it. I think officers have done a lot of work on this. We have got those external consultants that are still telling us that they don't think we can refuse on those grounds. And I think if we do, we will lose it at appeal and have costs against us. I do think in there with the footpath that goes in there, paragraph 2.5 on page 7, that last line there says the updated the condition, namely condition 27 below, requiring that a TRO is submitted, and if approved, the works are carried out prior to the occupation of any dwelling. But when looking at that condition, the if approved isn't reflected in the condition. And I do wonder, I know KCC in the report say that they are sort of happy to extend yellow lines, but once you actually start getting out there and having objections, I think something needs to be just in that condition to tighten up to make sure that if it is refused for any reason, that condition would be tied up, that it still has to be delivered, which may be problematic. And also condition 1, I think just needs to be a little bit stronger in there. I'll just go on that. About the footpath, it says details to include reference to the proposed footpath. I think we need to have that tightened up a bit more and actually specifically ask in there that full details of how that is going to be dealt with. It does say in there, trying to sort of stop people using that footpath. If there is a path there, people will use it. I think more detail to be added would be good for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, I'd say that where you're replacing an agricultural field with dwellings with decent sized gardens, it's not difficult to envisage that there would be a net gain in biodiversity. I've listened to the debate about this application on more than one occasion, and I've been to the site visit, and I've heard nothing yet that will convince me that this application should be approved. I think that the loss of amenity to existing residents is not outweighed by the provision of 10 new dwellings, and I can't support the officers on this one, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, can I just ask you to come in on the conditions?
Yeah, just those points that Councillor Hunt made in terms of the conditions. I'll take them in numerical order. Firstly, 1, the reference to that footpath is the one that goes through the joinery yard, and that's a hangover from the previous conditions where it was one of the possible routes. There is the option to amend that so that it essentially allows for that route to be not stopped up, but a deterrent to be placed there so that people don't use it and don't access the A2 through the joinery yard. Because I know there's been some member concern about that, and some wider concern, in fact. In terms of 27, what that condition requires is for the application for the TRO to be made. But we can't condition it in terms of it being approved because it's a process that takes place outside of the planning process. So the condition would fail the test of being relevant to planning. So that's why it's worded in the way that it is.
Excellent. Thanks for that. I can understand that 27. I think 1, if it can be then beefed up a bit, I think that would be good. So especially I'm also thinking if this does go to appeal, we need to be clear that there is intentions there to stop that or stop people rather than just having a reference somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking back at Appendix 4 on page 55, the illustrative plans shows an indicative housing mix as follows. A total of 10 houses, but it's also giving the number of persons per house. And that totals up to 37 people with 20 car parking spaces, 2 of which are spaces for visitors and 3 of which are for existing residents of Linstead Lane. So that's reduced the number of parking spaces usable by those inhabitants to 15 spaces. And I'm finding it difficult to believe that there's going to be more than 2 per house, especially when you've put down that there's 7 persons in a 4-bedroom house. Straight away, you can see that if 7 persons move in, I would have thought there'd be more than 2 cars in that household, especially as there's no other means of transport. That's going to increase the amount of traffic up and down Linstead Lane, and especially when there's limited footpaths, there's no amenities accessible by, or hardly any amenities accessible by foot, and that's going to increase the number of traffic flow in that lane. So can you explain to me how you come by stating that we should have 2 parking spaces per dwelling, yet you're giving 3 away to Linstead residents and 2 spaces for visitors?
Yeah, that part is indicative on the basis this is an outline application. So layout is a reserved matter. As part of that layout, you'll get a parking scheme, and that'll have to comply with the council's adopted parking SPD. So it's not a matter that can be considered under this application. That's for information upon the indicative details.
Okay, well then I would like that to be explored even deeper at the next meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, please.
I think there's now been 2 councillors that have hinted at it, so we best put a formal proposal on the table to make that amendment to condition 1 to where are we? The wording in 2.11. Require the reserve matter to demonstrate how use of the joinery yard route would be deterred for future residents. If we can add that to condition 1, and I'll seek a seconder.
Second, Councillor Henderson, thank you. Members, those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, members, anybody else want to speak on the substantive motion? Councillor Henderson.
Come back just briefly.
Very briefly.
I mean, we have gone round in circles here, and the message is coming through. We think it's a lousy idea, but we can't work out a reason to turn it down. Could I ask for advice from officers? I think some of the points Councillor Bonney raised were really relevant in terms of saying, how can you decide this in terms of in principle without knowing what it is that is planned? And I wonder whether we should not say that this is such a sensitive site that it requires a full planning application for this committee to consider, and therefore it is justified to turn down an outline application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have no powers to do that. But they've applied for outline planning consent, and that's an accepted part of the process that they can do. I haven't got anything further to add.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, I'll take this one to the vote then. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? Those against? Abstentions? So that's 11 against, 4 abstentions and 1 for. So that motion is lost. So we'll need to come to the floor now for a proposal for reason for refusal. Councillor Winkler.
Well, I would like to, on the grounds of what I said when I made my brief comments earlier on, and it's a concern of mine, I don't change my mind on it, is the visibility. OKCC, said that it's satisfactory, but in my view, it's not. So I think that's a consideration. Thank you.
I would suggest we need something a little stronger than that to take us forward. Mr. Gregory, would you like to comment?
Yeah, there's very sort of clear requirements in terms of visibility and what's required for the access, and this scheme meets those requirements in technical highway terms. So I think we'd fail if we refused it on that basis.
Councillor Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my concerns are the parish councillor very distinctly made not accusations but comments regarding some of the reports, and that it was felt that they were inadequate in certain ways. I feel that there is a lot of public concern regarding these reports, and we shouldn't ignore what the public has to say and their feelings, and that we get a proper report done at proper times with relevant information that we can then consider.
I'm just going to bring our legal officer in at this point, if I may.
Yeah, I think I would just advise that we've taken the statutory consultee's advice, Kent Highways. They've come back and said that there are no highway safety concerns. It meets national and local policies. The committee at the last discussion were minded not to agree with that position and recommended a further report was done. That further report has been commissioned by this council, and that has also concluded that there are no highway safety concerns, that it's compliant with local and national policy, and it's further addressed the points that the committee asked to be looked at. I think if we go out again for a further highways report, it's highly likely that the applicant will appeal, and I would imagine it would be highly likely that the appeal would be successful and that we would be held to be behaving unreasonably, because we've got two separate independent statutory consultee and other reports telling us there are no highway concerns. I would also just like to point out as well, before we go into further discussions about potential reasons for refusal, because the committee is clearly minded to find a reason to refuse. Affordable housing was mentioned, and a lack of government policy is that 10 or less dwellings do not need to provide affordable housing. So you have absolutely no basis to refuse on those grounds. And on the application of the tilted balance, whilst I appreciate the sentiments of the committee that 10 houses isn't going to make much difference, unfortunately, that's not what the tilted balance says. The tilted balance 11D, presumption in favour of sustainable development, where there are no relevant development plan policies, or those policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date. And the footnote says that's where you have no 5-year supply and or have failed the housing delivery test. That the application of policies in the framework that protects areas and assets of particular importance gives you a reason to refuse. That is things like triple SIs, Green Belt, AONB. They're not applicable. Or where adverse impacts of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So if you're going down that route, you need to significantly and demonstrably illustrate with evidence how this site outweighs the benefits in terms of its harms. So that would be my advice to you. If you're going to go down that route of refusal, you have to make sure that you can demonstrate how the benefits are significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the harms. So I'll leave it there.
Can I ask then, regarding the assessments that were made and that we get details of how and when the assessments were of the parking or the traffic count was made, what times, because it was said that they were actually checked at unreasonable hours at times. That concerns me. If it's true, then it will make an impact on the report. But I would like to know exactly what times and when these assessments were made on the traffic and that road.
Right, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have that information to hand.
Well, considering that the accusations that have been made, I think they should be.
Right, okay, Councillor Stephen, please try to refrain and let me come in. So I'll bring in our officer, and I'm sure he probably has from what he's just said.
It might take me a couple of seconds.
Whilst you're just flicking through from that, can I just invite Councillor Palmer to speak briefly?
Sure, thank you, Chair. I think one of the grounds is on air quality, because the NPPF guidance obliges the council when looking at development proposals to make sure pollution inputs are reduced. I can see no evidence of how this application will reduce the effects in the air quality management area. So I think there's grounds of impact on air quality. I don't think the development is sustainable in the location that it's in. And I think the tilted balance, and I did mention it earlier, and it's interesting that the officer or the legal advice was, we're always told to follow planning case law or consistent applying of what happens in planning. Well, I'd like to refer you to the Land of Jubilee Fields Upchurch, a decision made in 11th of December 20, where paragraph 18, even so the council didn't have a 5-year supply, it was 4.6. In fact, the planning appeal inspector considered it was more like 4 years. Bearing in mind this application was for 41 houses. The planning inspector gave a greater weight to the local plan policies, to the development plan, than he did to the MPPF at that time, because the local development plan policies have a weight of law and the MPPF is a framework. So there are legal cases, and quite often it's been upheld in the High Court that it's a balanced decision. So one house may not make a big difference. 10 houses will not have a major impact on a 5-year housing supply when we've got 4.6. And the case record for that is the appeal decision at Upchurch, Jubilee Fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Yeah, sorry. So I was a bit bullish saying I had exactly the details in terms of the parking survey, but they were undertaken over 2 nights. And there's reference when everyone's at home, that is. There's reference.
I'm sorry, I'll stop you there. If everyone's at home, there's no traffic, is there?
Right, could I just ask in the public gallery, please? I understand that you want to applaud and the things have been taken, and I too are quite passionate about many things, but please let the members speak and let the officer speak, and let's do them the courtesy that we've done to everybody so far this evening. And I thank you all for that. Thank you. So, Mr. Gregory.
Yeah, if I can, thank you. The applicant's technical note then responds to that in some detail, and says essentially that the parking stress, which is used to measure basically how much stress there is in terms of parking and what's going to tip the balance in terms of it being unacceptable, that falls where it's considerably below where you essentially have a problem. That's been taken back to our consultant who has agreed. There's also been a discussion about the methodology in terms of the parking, and when the surveys were done, and it's been accepted, and also the consultant that we've used has visited the site themselves during the day. So I think that's been considered sort of in a lot of detail. There were some other points made by Councillor Palmer in terms of air quality. There's a discussion regarding that in the original report. Bear with me, I'll find the paragraph number.
And so, sorry, while you're doing that, I mean, the traffic flow in that area, what time of the day was that done?
Shall I air quality or traffic survey? What shall I do first? Right, okay. So what time was the traffic survey carried out?
And what time of year?
Bear with me. I mean, whilst I'm looking for it, there's accepted ways that the surveys have to be carried out, and that's part of the things that KCC Highways and the consultant would have checked. So they'd have flagged an issue if they were concerned that the surveys had been done at the wrong time.
Yeah, I'm still asking what time.
Yeah, I'm still looking.
Okay, in the meantime, Councillor Eakin, you indicated you wish to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In regards to kind of a reason for refusal, then there's obviously the residential amenities kind of in regards to parking, but most importantly, the safety of the walking 200 metres. I don't know if that's kind of a reason that we could look at, because it's quite important, whether it's specifically one, but.
Okay, I'll get a response to that in a second.
Chairman, sorry to butt in. Do do you want me to answer some of the, while Mr. Gregory's checking the
Yes,
parking?
please. It would help
I
us.
think we've got three other points, 3 points in total. Just on the pavement, one of the planning merits advantages of this scheme is that a pavement is proposed between the site access and the existing pavements at Tenham. So I wouldn't go near anything to do with pedestrian access to the facilities as a potential refusal reason, because of that isn't going to be a runner in my judgment. Air quality, it was at least one member's commented on it during the main debate, but Environmental Health aren't objecting. And it's clear that they don't think that there's a problem, or despite it being an air quality management area, they're not objecting to the application, and they make that stance sort of pretty clear, and that definitely includes air quality as one of their considerations. And the last point Councillor Palmer made was about drawing an analogy with the Jubilee Fields site in Upchurch, and this point about whether the sites are sustainable or not. The difference there is that Tenham is at tier 4. It's a rural local services centre in our settlement hierarchy, which, whilst Upchurch is tier 5, meaning that it's less sustainable and less appropriate as a location for additional development. Upchurch is called, well, it's classed as other villages with built up area boundaries. So there's a clear difference there. If we were at an appeal and we tried to use Jubilee Fields as an example to justify refusing the Tenham scheme on sustainability grounds, I think would be I think that would be very difficult, because, as I say, they're at different levels of the settlement hierarchy. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. I never used the Jubilee Fields as a point about sustainability. I used the Jubilee Fields to highlight the issue of the tilted balance, and that quite often at appeal and at the High Courts, they have deemed that the local plan policy takes precedence. Nothing about sustainability. I did mention sustainability, and I think, as the chair of the parish council made, there are lack of school places, there are lack of doctors' facilities. It might be a tier 4, but it's a tier 4 that is really being stretched to the point at the moment, and things are being cut, and it's an unsustainable in that respect. The environmental health team may have not mentioned anything about air quality, but the NPPF does, and it's quite clear that development needs to show how it's going to reduce the impacts on the air quality. This application doesn't show that. And that was made quite clear in the High Court on the ruling at Pond Farm at Newington, where I live and I was active in. So Pond Farm Newington set a principle of demonstrating how a development that impacts on an air quality area reduces the air quality or improves the air quality in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got some detail when the road safety audit was carried out on the 22nd of November 2021 between 10:05 and 10:30 a.m. Yeah. And 10:30. Yeah. AM. Yeah.
Right, members, I want to put it out there now to try and get this one wrapped up. I've asked for reasons for refusal from the floor, and I just kind of want to expedite this one. So can I have that? Because at the minute I'm still not getting anything even remotely. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been trying to provide some reasons. We clearly have legal advice on what we can and, well, mostly what we can't do. I think we need to explore the basis on which we can make a sensible decision. And I believe there is a valid decision to be made on the grounds of amenity. There is going to be damage to the amenities of the people currently living in Linstead Lane. There will be damage to their amenities regarding car parking. There will be damage to their amenities regarding loss of hedgerows and just the countryside. And I think that is a valid problem. But there is also inadequate amenity for the proposed houses which are to be built. And I'm not inventing anything new here. My son lives in Tenham, although he doesn't seem to be there very often. But in Tenham, we have lost already the GP. We have an AQMA in the High Street. We have, I think we lost the post office, although I believe it may have reopened somewhere else. But there are not, Tenham may be allocated as a Tier 4 centre, but it doesn't have the facilities you would expect in a Tier 4 centre. So I would suggest there is a damage to amenities of existing residents, and the amenities for people coming to live in the new houses are simply not adequate. And to move things along, I propose that as a reason for turning this application down.
Okay, so could you couch that in kind of a 1 minute session rather than a 10? Because obviously we.
Well, simply the proposal is that we should turn it down on the grounds of damage to current amenities of residents.
Could I just ask you to slow a little whilst
Sorry.
steam coming off to Mr. Gregory's pen at the minute?
Current amenities of residents, plus the fact that the amenities for the new houses are inadequate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
I will happily second that, but I would ask, Chair, if we could hear from Mr. Algar, as he has indicated in the chat that he may have something that might assist us.
Thank you. Mr. Algar, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I just wanted to advise that I have been involved in this application and provided advice to the planning officers. There are some heritage assets in the area. Has been I'm one of the earlier speakers, but I just really wanted to caution members against the possible use of a heritage related reason for refusal, because I think the level of impact on those heritage assets is a very low level. The level of significance that the listed buildings on the A2 road frontage derive from their wider setting is quite limited because of the particular nature of those heritage assets. Also, the setting will be changing, but there's quite a distance between the listed buildings and the application site. And with the indicative details showing that it should be possible to maintain a strong landscape frontage to the site, I think would be quite difficult to sustain on appeal a reason for refusal. So I really just wanted to suggest that if you're minded to refuse the application, but I would advise against trying to use a heritage related reason for refusal. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a very short recess to allow the officers to look at the refusal reason and see if we can get something a little bit more.
Let's give the officers all the reasons.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, councillor Valentine.
So, well, a reason would be an unacceptable impact on the joinery business from the footpath, the access through their yard. And I don't get this deterrence. People will walk that way because it's the shortest way to the high street. And if you can get through, people would, I'm sure, much rather do that than walk along a footpath on a busy, narrow lane on Linstead Road. So that whole thing makes the whole development much less sustainable if you take that footpath out, and you need to take it out because of the impact on the business. I think we must mention that the KCC are consulting on removing all the bus services from Tenham. That makes the location much less sustainable than the basis on which this report had been written. And there's no evidence that the priority shuttle system interaction with the junction on the A2 has been considered in these reports because they haven't mentioned it. And I think that proposal is just dangerous. And I would say we're constantly told that, you know, we can't object on this grounds because this consultee has said that. I just wonder, why do we have a planning committee? You could just do it on an algorithm. What we bring is that we represent the local people and we bring local knowledge. And if we're not allowed to have that local knowledge count, there's no point to this committee.
I agree in everything you've said, but I would also have residents that would say to me, why are you wasting hundreds of thousands of pounds of my money on appeals that you know might not be successful? So we need to keep that kind of balance as well. But yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. I too was going to make the point about loss of amenity to existing residents. If we need to say that we need to demonstrate how that is going to be the case, my understanding is that double yellow lines are going to be painted along parts of Linstead Lane, meaning that residents aren't going to be able to park where those double yellow lines are. Surely that is a demonstrable loss of amenity to local residents. They haven't asked to have the double yellow lines put there. The double yellow lines are being put there to facilitate this development. And I think that's a very good reason to refuse it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. Right. I quite agree with what's been said, because although in the report it says that they can demonstrate a loss of parking on Linstead Lane can be accommodated elsewhere, I think we're saying it's a test of reasonableness. Is it reasonable this impact will have on the local residents? And I think what we're saying is it's not. But the other thing, and going back to what I was harping on about before about design and that rural lane, is that access comes out directly opposite property. Now that pavement on the other side, there is absolutely no scope to landscape to mitigate for headlights going into that property, the constant flow of traffic in and out of that development. So to my mind, that is a harm to the residents living opposite or nearby that junction, because you swing round with your lights on, because they're going to stop parking along there. There'll be no parked cars to block that, which at the moment they don't have that. They live on a single lane there. But if you've got traffic coming at you at the front of your house day and night, I think that's different. That's a whole different kettle of fish. If it was moved somewhere else, then maybe the committee might say that's reasonable. But the plan layout there quite clearly shows that is a narrow pavement opposite, not capable of being landscaped.
Thank you.
If it would help, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to accept those recent comments as amendments to the proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, would it help if you had a 5-minute recess to discuss it with our legal officer? Thank you very much. So we're going to recess, members, and we reconvene in 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Councillor Horton, can you hear me?
Okay, could we all get back together again, please? Apologies for the length of time that took. So first of all, I'm going to invite our head of planning to speak, Flo Churchill. Thank you, Flo.
Members, the length of time it's taken us as officers to come up for refusal that we believe may be defensible is indicative of the trouble that we have had. We strongly advise you as members not to use any technical reasons for refusal. So I'm going to ask Mr. Gregory to read out the reason for refusal that we believe may be sustainable, but I do need to warn you that we think it's not a strong case and there is the potential award of costs.
Thank you. Just to clarify, this is not sort of refined in terms of paragraph numbers of the relevant policies, etc. But this is the general wording that will be used, and it is the lack of and reduction of services and facilities in Tenham since the adoption of the local plan results in the development being unsustainable, meaning that reliance on the private car to access services and facilities in higher order settlements contrary to the aims of the MPPF in terms of moving to a low carbon future. Well, the advice is that we go with that reason for refusal.
Okay, members, Councillor Martin.
If that's what we've got that's defensible potentially, then that's what we're going to have to go with. So happy if we need to propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Palmer, thank you. And Councillor Henderson.
Can I ask the question? I appreciate not going for technical reasons, but lack of amenity for existing people and future people doesn't seem to me to be a technical argument. And I simply ask why officers are not recommending using that wording at all, apparently.
Does that mean amenity, as far as I understand, in terms of the parking situation and the loss of parking outside their house and also the loss of a hedgerow? Were those the two main points? Is that right?
Councillor Martin.
Okay. The reason that we've not used those is because we're in a situation with the 5-year housing land supply where we don't have one. The harm's going to have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. An inspector's going to give a lot of weight to 10 houses in that position, and I don't think he's going to give. I don't think he's going to identify significant harm that we can demonstrate through those points. That's the reason why we haven't included it.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but that is 10 against 1.
Sorry, Councillor Stephen, could you wait your turn, please? Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. I think obviously officers have taken the time and come up with that. Just a question I've got on that. If it's decided to vote on that and take that forward, that we're saying that Tenham is unsustainable, it would mean that any other development that comes up in Tenham should be taking the same view. So is there then going to be impact on any other development that comes forward? Because it will be the same situation, that this is an unsustainable location if it's outside the built-up area boundary.
Yeah, the difficulty with that, of course, is that each application will have to be taken on its merit anyway, but I do hear what you're saying. Yes, Mr. Byrne.
Just a quick point on that. We're not in any way suggesting that this is a strong reason for refusal. We've obviously had the message from members what they consider the situation is here, and we're looking to construe something that may have some form of defence to it, but we don't consider it's a strong defence. But that's the best we've come up with what we've been given, essentially. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, and I think I've come across this situation once before, where one individual has to suffer for the benefit of 10 others. Now, obviously, I certainly wouldn't like 10 lots of headlights coming in my windows every single day or night, and I'm sure that it just won't be just the one resident there that's got to put up with this. So that is, I think, a good enough, or a good reason why we should change either the location or not have it at all.
Yeah, Councillor Burt, please. Welcome. You haven't spoken all night.
I haven't, Chairman, and I'm only planning to speak on a point of order on procedure. Before the officers went out to discuss this, there was a proposal that had been seconded on the floor. And can I have assurances that that has been withdrawn now before we talk to the one that has now been proposed and seconded, because you can't have two on the floor at the same time.
Correct. So, Councillor Henderson, can I have your confirmation you've withdrawn your proposal? Thank you. And Councillor Martin, seconder. Right. So we have the what Mr. Gregory is recommending. Can I have a proposal for that? Yes, of course.
Could you just read it again?
The lack of and reduction of services and facilities in Tenham since the adoption of the local plan results in the development being unsustainable, meaning that reliance on the private car to access services and facilities in higher order settlements will be required, which is contrary to the aims of the NPPF in terms of moving to a low carbon future.
Okay, could I have a proposal for that? Seconder. So Councillor Martin proposed, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions. So that motion is carried and permission is refused subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public. I'm sorry it's taken us such a long time this morning to get this evening to get this far. It feels like this morning. And wish you all a safe trip back. Thank you. Mm. 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 Okay, members, we now move on to the next item, which is deferred item 2, and that's 21/506021/ and this one is 21 Chaucer Road, Sittingbourne. Page 101, deferred item 2. I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's no update for members. In terms of a brief summary, the application relates to a takeaway unit that you can see on the photograph, which is within a shopping parade in Sittingbourne. The application was reported to committee in March, but deferred in order that officers could further investigate potential planning breaches on site. This has been undertaken. In particular, there was concern about reports that part of the building was being used for sleeping accommodation for staff, which does appear to have been the case. That appears now to have ceased, so hopefully that breach has now been removed. But obviously, officers can continue to monitor that if further reports are made. So the application has been presented back to members and seeks permission to vary the opening hours of the takeaway. As permitted, the takeaway opens 6 days per week until 9 o'clock at night. The application was originally made to extend the hours to allow opening until 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. However, following consultation with environmental health and with regard to trying to strike the right balance with local residents, particularly those who live above the shopping parade, officers have recommended that the hours are extended only on Friday and Saturday from 9 p.m. until 10 p.m. And at the moment, there's no opening on Sunday. Officers would recommend that Sunday opening is limited until 8 p.m. Like I say, we consider that strikes the right balance between meeting the operational needs of the business and residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Mr. Tamser, please, to speak on this item? Mr. Attaway, do you know if Mr. Tamser's online?
I can't see him online. I have his speech and I can read it out.
Yes, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
At the last committee, I believe it was not proposed I believe it was not the proposed hours of opening that were in contention, but the overhanging enforcement notice issued regarding staff staying overnight on the premises and late night noise issues. A retrospective planning application for the change of use of the outbuilding store to a welfare room where staff could have restricted use to sleep overnight was applied for and refused on the grounds that it would create a self-contained residential unit and had potential to result in undue noise impacts. However, the applicant has recently acquired premises where his staff can now stay overnight, 81A High Street, Sittingbourne. This eliminates the need for any staff to be on the premises any longer than half an hour after closing time. The proposed times of 11:30 till 9 o'clock Monday to Thursday and 11:30 to 10 o'clock on Friday to Saturday and 4:30 till 8 o'clock on Sundays will bring the Madras Cafe in line with other hot food takeaways in Chaucer Road. It should be noted that Yummy Yummy, the Chinese takeaway in Chaucer Road, recently had these same hours approved. It would therefore be discriminative not only to the Madras Cafe, the same opportunity to operate their business.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I now invite Ward Member Councillor Simon Clark to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, could I ask the officer a question with regards to the refusal of the planning application for the shed, which is on the left-hand end of the building? Are you aware, or can you confirm or deny that the facilities and furniture that was provided has been removed from that part of the premise?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the officers has inspected the property internally, and there is no living stroke bed accommodation there at all.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. In terms of the actual extension of the opening hours, as was read in the statement that Mr. Attaway has just read out, the Yummy Yummy Chinese restaurant was granted permission for exactly the same hours I believe both, well, I was consulted on the Chinese restaurant, and I believe Councillor Truelove may have been as well, which has been approved. So really, as has been said, you can't really discriminate against this takeaway for wanting to open for the same hours as the Chinese restaurant. However, since this restaurant opened, I think approximately 15 months or so ago, maybe slightly short, maybe slightly longer, but anyway, around that sort of time, they have consistently breached the conditions that were in place at the time for extended opening hours. They've been open quite often until 10:30, 11 o'clock in the evening with takeaway delivery services attending the premises. And to say they haven't been opening on Sundays is incorrect. They have been opening on Sundays, maybe not every Sunday, but they have been opening on Sundays, whereas their planning conditions said they should not be. Now, whilst I'm not a member of this committee anymore and I can't make a recommendation, what I would like to see, because I feel that with such scant regard for their previous conditions, I would like to see, if possible, a temporary permission of 1 year placed on this extension of hours in order to give both residents, myself and the enforcement and planning officers the opportunity to monitor this restaurant in case, and I believe they will, breach their conditions in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think that what was the concern was last time was the enforcement issues, and that has been now dealt with. As we've heard, the times and the Chinese restaurant, there is no reason, I don't think, to refuse this. There is obviously that concern that they're not going to stick to the conditions, but if that is the case, then it's an enforcement issue. And if we approve this tonight, whether it's temporary or not, those conditions will remain and enforcement can take action against them. I see no reason why we would be saying that it's a temporary. I think as the report is here is correct, and enforcement will need to deal with it if it arises.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo Councillor Clark's concerns about this establishment. If we're minded to pass this tonight, I would suggest we have a temporary condition put on for 1 year of the revised hours, so that it can be tested to see if they are basically behaving themselves and abiding by the new hours. So can I, a temporary condition, yeah.
Permission, you mean?
Sorry? Well, temporary permission, if I get a seconder for that.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Jackson. Those in favour? Of a temporary permission. Those against? So did you get to count that? Have you got to do that again? That's 3 for, 9 against and abstentions. Okay, 4 abstentions. So that fails. So we're back to substantive officer's recommendation. Those in favour? Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I've got Councillor Jackson. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. We had one in Lower Road that came up a few months ago and it was passed, and I can't see any objection to this one apart from which has just fallen, the temporary condition. So yes, and there's been absolutely no trouble at all from the one, as I live in that road, and it's not in my ward, but I totally agree.
Thank you. So those in favour of officer recommendation? Those against? Oh, sorry. Those in favour, keep your hands up. Cheryl, can you just keep up, please? Those against? And abstentions? So that's carried and permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. Right, we're going to jump ahead on the agenda now to item 2.3, as that's got speakers on that one. And that's 21/506/474 and this is Burntwick, the street, Upchurch, Sittingbourne, Kent. And I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, just getting myself ready. Okay, if I could draw members' attention to the tabled update. Firstly, members will be aware from that there is an update in terms of the heritage considerations, which includes the formal comments from the Council's Conservation and Design Manager in full, and also a proposed amendment to one of the planning conditions. I also understand that members were circulated some comments. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. No, I don't think you were. I think Councillor Horton wants to speak on the application, doesn't he? Is that right? And that came through today. Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, just a tabled update. So in terms of the application site itself, so the site is currently part of the garden to this property here, which is called Burntwick. It's a detached chalet style building, and as you can see, it sits in a backland location close to the centre of Upchurch, but actually just outside the formal built confines of the village. And the confines of the village, if you follow the map on the screen, essentially run around the church. So the church is within the village, comes down to the back of the last building and the pub, and then up here, and then runs along this boundary here. It excludes Burntwick and it excludes the village hall to the rear. So technically it's in the countryside. In addition, what you can see on the plan is the conservation area to Upchurch, and as you can see, the boundaries run to the southern boundary and eastern boundary, and partially to the north boundary of the site. And then we have St Mary's Church here, which is a Grade 1 listed building. The application that we have is for a pair of semi-detached dwellings within the garden of Burntwick, which are shown here, more or less in line with Burntwick itself, and set slightly behind number 21, the street, which is here, and approximately there's a gap of 9 metres between the flank wall of number 21 and the proposed semi-detached properties. Although it's adjacent to the conservation area, the site is considered to be fairly discreet, and as I said, a backland location. The design of the units, you can see the floor plans and elevations here. They don't come out particularly well, I'm afraid, on the plan that you can see in front of you, but essentially you have a combination of brick and rendered elevations in part to the building. You have a small wing at the front here with a cat slide style roof to the front of each property. You have some half dormers on the front elevation and on the rear elevation as well. And you have these small projecting gables at the rear as well. I'll show you some photographs. This is the within the site itself. This is a neighbouring property at number 21. Burntwick is just out of the picture. So it's this area here where the houses would be built. That's looking towards Burntwick. That is facing towards the properties on the street that back onto the site. That's a view across the site towards where the site entrance would be located, and you can see the church in the background there. That's looking to the rear of the site towards the village hall. And again, that's a view across the site from the far corner towards the properties on the street. Again, that's Burntwick. This is where the proposed access would come out. The access comes out onto a shared access that's used by the village hall. So the street is on the right hand side, the village hall is in this direction, and you have the pub, which is behind me as I've taken the photo in the pub car park. This is taken from the street itself. This is a bungalow. These are the two-storey terraced units. You can see Burntwick again in the background there, and the dwellings would be located sort of here. And then this is looking in the other direction from the street. So you've got the pub there and the terrace. And from the other direction, you can see you have some fairly modern residential units here. Number 21, the street is screened behind this unit because it sits further back, as is Burntwick, as would be the proposed dwellings. Now, in terms of impacts, officers are of the view that the site can accommodate development of this scale and form. In terms of heritage impacts, as you'll see from the tabled update, although there is a small degree of harm that's been identified, that is on the very low level of scale. The other issue is that although the site is outside the built confines, the tilted balance applies under paragraph 11 of the NPPF. Given our lack of 5-year housing supply, our view is that the harm to the countryside is incredibly limited, if at all, given that essentially the site is surrounded by other built form. So based on that, our recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Parish Councillor Rosewell, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you. Good evening. Gary Rosewell, representing the views of Upchurch Parish Council. Upchurch Parish Council has objected to this application due to the concerns raised by the residents. We do not consider the amendments that they've changed have mitigated the residents' concern, and because of the number of Upchurch residents that continue to object to the plans. Of the 12 residential properties that border the boundary of this development, 10 have registered objections. Number 7, 9, 11, 15 and 19 of the polls, numbers 15, 17, 19, 21 and 23 of the street. As I say, 10 of the 12 properties that actually border this have registered a complaint. The complaints from the residents include such things as loss of privacy, loss of light, overshadowing and overbearing development. The overall ridge height of the proposed development is too high. There are differences in the ground height of the site and the poles back gardens of about 1.5 metres. Loss of enjoyment of private back gardens. The development is not in keeping with the area bordering a conservation area. There will be additional traffic to an already difficult junction, and visitors to these properties would add to the parking problems in the area, as well as servicing of these houses by such vehicles as Amazon and the supermarket delivery vans. The only registered support is from 114 Oak Lane, over half a mile away, and that support states they would rather see a development like this than take further green land. In the years I've been on Upchurch Parish Council, this has stimulated more local comments than usual, and it is for these reasons that Upchurch Parish Council does not support this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Peter Rippengate, please, to speak on this item?
I and the occupants of the neighbouring properties call upon this planning committee to refuse this application. If not, we call for an adjournment pending a full site visit to allow the planning committee members to get a fuller understanding of the site layout and its associated problems, which are not evident from the planning documents submitted. Our community have several key concerns as to how this development will impact our lives. Access in emergencies such as fire, where immediate response will be required. Neighbouring properties will be subjected to significant loss of light and privacy. The street and the poles in particular, especially as the extent of the ridge height is uncertain. Numbers 9 and 11 the poles and 21 the street will bear the brunt of the gable end and its associated loss of light. Some properties in the poles sit at a much lower ground level than Burntwick and would be more adversely affected. Residents of these properties and all other properties surrounding the development will lose the ability to enjoy their back gardens without being overlooked. There will be a significant loss of visual amenity for many, with views of our much loved St Mary's Church and Burntwick House being lost. We currently live in the centre of Upchurch, having character and space. Some occupiers in the streets will lose the view of Burntwick's gardens, which offers them peace and tranquility, to be replaced by hard standing and motor vehicles. The development is too dense given the size of the existing plot and does not integrate with the surroundings and the general peaceful character of the area. We will see increased traffic on the access road frequently used by the local nursery in their daily walks with preschool children. Additionally, routine goods and service deliveries to these properties will add to the number of traffic movements in an already congested area having little available parking. Noise from construction activities will adversely affect shift workers who are required to sleep in daytime and home workers. Construction workers will not be entitled to use the Village Hall car park as it is for hall users only. Local parking is already at saturation point and does not need this added pressure. We are also concerned about the use of our minor roads by construction traffic with accidents waiting to happen. In summary, Upchurch is a pleasant community enjoying all that village life has to offer. Should this speculative back garden development and future developments like this take place, Upchurch will lose its village charm. We call upon this committee to do the right thing and refuse this application, given the large number of objections raised.
Thank you. Could I now invite Stephen Smith, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening. I just wanted to make a couple of points, as when we bought the property 5 years ago, the previous owners had made inquiries about a planning application to demolish the existing house, Burntwick, and replace it with 6 houses, 4 terrace and 2 semi-detached properties, for which the planners had said they would support. We decided that the existing property, although in a very poor state of repair, would make a lovely family home, which it has. The reason we started this application is to provide a property for our son and his partner, so they can get a foothold on the property ladder and start a family of their own. That is why we started with 2 detached properties, but due to comments from both planning officer and conservation officer, changed to a pair of semis to reduce the footprint and move it further away from number 21 The Street. As far as the impact on the church is concerned, the proposed development does not affect the view from the churchyard, as it is behind the existing property, Burntwick. Last week, I invited Councillor Palmer to come and see the proposed development, as I was sure he was unaware of the proximity to the neighbours, which he was very keen to do, and asked if any of the objectors were welcome, which of course they were. The other neighbours in the street who claim the development will be overshadowing their property are a minimum of 36 metres from their back wall to the proposed front wall, and the neighbours in the poles are even further away. Considering I have cleared all the trees and bushes that have been allowed to grow over their gardens at a much higher level than the proposed development, they would certainly not lose any light or privacy in their properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Alan Horton as ward member to speak on this item?
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Councillor Horton. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can you confirm that you have a couple of graphs that I sent in earlier today? If you haven't, I'll work without them. Doesn't sound like you have.
Yeah, just give us 1 second.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks like we have. We're just trying to get
Excellent. Them up. Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm very grateful to the legal officer who I think outlined the task ahead of us. Because there is a tilted balance, the requirement is to show that the harm significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefit of this development. I think there are 3 material considerations that I want to cover today, which I think, when taken together, probably go a long way to demonstrate that they outweigh the benefits of this development. The first is the loss of sunlight. The second is overshadowing, and the third is the effect on listed buildings and conservation areas. And I'll start at the big picture and work backwards. If you'll just indulge me for a moment, Upchurch is the only village in England called Upchurch. It is defined by the Church of St Mary the Virgin, and the name Upchurch literally means the church on a hill. There are paragraphs which I would want to read to the committee from a report to planning on the 2nd of February 2006, which was the last review of the conservation area. The first one, and perhaps the most important, the substantial size and prominent position of the church make it a truly commanding and pivotal presence in the centre of Upchurch, whilst the mature trees standing within the graveyard add further substance to the site's strong sense of history. And in conclusion, it said the preservation and reinstatement, where appropriate, of features contributing to the distinctive character of the place should be a priority. The old core of Upchurch is of central importance to the historic identity of the settlement, and is therefore a place of special architectural or historical interest, the character or appearance of which it is desirable to preserve or enhance. That whether there is an impact on the amenity of the village is a subjective judgment, and I have a great deal of respect for the officers who have prepared this report. But when you speak to the people in Upchurch, the thought that they will not be able to see their church from their homes, or in fact frequently check on the clock which is on the tower of the church, horrifies them, because this church defines the village. If I come down slightly closer, you will have noticed that there is one building which is substantially closer to the proposed development than anything else, and that's number 21 The Street, which is set well back from the road. The resident of 21 Street has written in her submission to this planning committee that when the sun is at 45
Your
degrees.
time, Councillor Horton.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Councillor Palmer as a ward member, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. It was quite lucky to read this application, reference Linstead Lane, that I mentioned the application at Jubilee Field, and the officer did remind us that Upchurch is a tier 5. Jubilee Field application was for 41 houses, turned down on appeal. The lack of a 5-year housing supply does not supersede policies in the development plan, and 2 houses will have no impact on the 5-year housing supply. It is a balance, and I feel the local plan development policies outweigh the tilted balance in this application. This application is not sustainable under the Swale Borough Council's development plan. Bearings Fruit Policy DM19, Sustainable Design and Construction, with features include features to enable energy efficient ways of living. I do not see this in this application. Effects on visual amenities has already been covered for the residents. Overdevelopment in the garden. The MPPF at paragraph 2124. Planning policies and decisions should support development that makes efficient use of land, taking into account the scope to promote sustainable travel modes that limit future car use. Upchurch is tier 5 because it has very poorly served, particularly by public transport. This development would be dependent on car and would be contrary to the MPPF. At 4.2 of the report, promoting sustainable transport. This does not support sustainable transport, and it doesn't even comply with the council's climate emergency. This application fails the sustainable transport test in the Swale Council's development plan. As I mentioned, the appeal at Jubilee Fields is quite interesting because the reasons for given Upchurch is a tier 5 village, making it one of the least, in development plan terms, one of the least desirable locations for new residential development in Upchurch. Upchurch is within the tier 5 because it has limited services. This application should be turned down because of what's in the development plan and in the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you now leaving the chamber? Thank you. Can I now invite Councillor Baldock, please, as a visiting member to speak on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have quite a lot of concerns about this particular application from a heritage aspect. I'd echo the parish councillor who suggested that a site visit should be considered. I think it's hard to judge just what level of impact this development would have without a site visit. I'd like a bit of clarity for the committee. In the update from the Conservation Officer, it says, in the event you are minded to recommend approval, planning conditions can and should be used to ensure that the low level of heritage impact harm does not increase to a higher level. I would advise that all the conditions I've recommended be imposed in the event of an imbalance recommendation of approval. I don't see those incorporated within the report and was wondering if they've been tabled before members so that they can actually incorporate them within their recommendation. I do feel that the heritage balance here is significant. Councillor Horton has made an excellent representation on that. I think that in the absence of a site visit, the impact on the heritage should weigh heavily in the balance. You'll see from the heritage report that there is evidence that but it is of a, albeit less than substantial, that is still a important level of harm. We have heard about the 5-year balance, but we've heard and again how inspectors will treat that very differently. This is only for 2 houses. It is not going to make a major contribution to the 5-year housing supply, unlike like Linstead. It's even less than Linstead. We do not really have to be held by that sort of argument to push forward things which are contrary to our own policies. I urge the committee to really consider whether or not the benefits do outweigh the harm here, and to actually say, yes, there is a heritage harm. Let's not impose that on the village of Upchurch. I'd also like to, yeah, on a site visit, you'll be able to see the ludicrous means of access to this property. It's very hard to judge it from a diagram, but it is not a suitable access for even more vehicles, because you know, a 4-bedroom house, that's going to be 3 or 4 cars. So I would really urge a site visit, but if not a site visit, a refusal on the grounds of heritage harm. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Martin, thank you. I've got Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at this, I said the first thing I thought is the design of the properties. I don't know if are able to put on the screen the actual the elevations. That's the one I'm looking for, Councillor Bit. Thanks. The design of the houses is what first struck me, and I could see that probably the materials, although they're conditioned, they look at a more modern design, and I actually do like them. I sort of hope that we see more of these sort of developments come forward, a bit more contemporary, but I don't think it works at this location, as we've got the heritage impact. I don't think that the balance of it is enough to refuse it, but I think something much better could come forward, which is more in keeping with the area. It's not just a Grade 1 listed church, it's that edge of the conservation area, and I don't think this will be in keeping with it. So I did listen to the parish council, I think it was, or the objector, and I did think there were some of the things that were said there about the levels of the land as well, and that area, and it is difficult to know. I do know the area, but when it's tucked around the back there. So I will propose a site visit, and whilst that is being done, ask officers that they can speak to the applicant to come up with something, if the applicant is open to changing the design to something that is more in keeping with that area whilst it is being deferred for a site visit. So I put that proposal forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Henderson. Those in favour of a site visit, or should we speak the site visit first? Yeah, Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, when I saw the pictures here, the lower level of design, is that the back, did you say?
So this is the front elevation here.
Yeah, and that's the bit
And
I
then
least like.
That's the rear that will face towards the village hall.
Yeah, so there's the top level is actually the bit that I find most objectionable. The lower one seems more in keeping with our sort of local style, as it were, but the top one, yeah, doesn't jars with me, I'm afraid. But I agree, I think it'd be worth a site visit.
Okay, so those in favour of a site visit? Yeah, with the officers discussing with Africa in the meantime, yeah. Those against? Abstentions? So this application is deferred then for a site visit, and I'll give you a date and time. Yes, you can, Mr. Byrne, yes.
Yes, sorry, if I can just clarify with members in terms of the amendments that are required, as I understand it, members are looking for presumably elevations to be more traditional in appearance, windows that reflect windows in the properties in the conservation area, so forth. Is that the direction of travel that members are looking for?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. it is a nice design, but I think that was going to be the thing. It's the heritage impact, and if something is more in keeping and a traditional design, then it lessens that impact on heritage.
Thank you.
And apologies, Mr. Algar, that you didn't get the opportunity to speak there. I know you were desperate to get in, but thank you anyway.
In preparation for the site visit, I think what would be useful is to have well, I say street plan, but it won't be a big garden plan, I suppose, of the heights of the neighbouring properties, looking across section with the church, so that we can have an understanding of that sight lines.
Okay, thank you. Members, we'll now move on to item 2.4 then, and this one is St Mawes, the street Borden. And I'll thank the officer for. Oh, Terry's, yeah, okay. An outline and any updates, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm new to the council and this is the first time I've addressed this committee. Anyway, the proposal is to enlarge and remodel the existing bungalow, which is in the picture in front of you. I'll start by running through a few photographs so that members can be aware of what the existing property is. In the last photograph, we had a front elevation. This is the view to the property at the back. Very large flat roof dormer. This is the same view from.
We're not getting your screen shared at the minute.
Oh. I don't know why that is. Are you seeing? Are you seeing now?
That's better, sir. Thank you.
Right. Well, let me go back then. Right. The property to be remodelled and extended is this existing front gabled bungalow. This is a view from the front of the property. This is a view from the back. Very large flat roofed dormer. This is the same view a bit further back into the rear garden. Like to just mention to members that neighbouring properties should be noted. This is a property called St Martin's Cottage, which has a very, very deep back projection. The other property affected is the adjacent bungalow, which is called Ridgeways. That's visible there. This is St Martin's again, from the street. This is Ridgeways. Anyway, I'll go to the plans. This is the existing site plan. Members will note that we have an existing projection at the front of the property. This is the property as existing, which we've seen in the photographs. This is the existing street elevation. Note St Martin's full height 2-storey house. To the left, Ridgeways, a bungalow of not dissimilar design to the existing property to be extended. This is a street elevation showing the view that will result as from the extensions that are now proposed. Bungalow 1.5 stories, full 2 height stories. This is simply the site plan as proposed. This here is the proposed elevation that will result from the extensions now proposed. This is the front elevation again. These are the floor plans, such that they contribute anything. Anyway, I thought I would just describe the proposals. The existing property is a fairly modest flank gabled bungalow with a large flat roofed rear dormer and a gabled projection to the front. The proposals seek to raise the ridge line of the building by 0.7 meters. The proposal is also to increase the height of the front projection to a height just below the new ridge line. At the back, the proposal is to extend the rear of the property by about 4 meters in a rear-facing gabled design. There'd be a dormer in the front elevation of the property as well. Overall, the view of officers, for the views expressed in the report, is that this would be a significant improvement on the appearance of the existing property, something that would sit comfortably in its surroundings. And although not spelt out in precise terms in the report, the fact is that the site is within the Boredom Conservation Area, so the council has a statutory duty to consider if a proposal would preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. The view of officers that the proposal would indeed do so. Overall, we consider the proposal to be well designed and consider it would sit comfortably in its surroundings and would be of benefit to the conservation area. So on that basis, the application is offered with a recommendation for approval subject to various conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you. Could I now invite Mrs. Wendy Esler, please, to speak on this item?
Hello. The objections I have are as a neighbour, so I do appreciate it's quite personal. We are on the east side of St Mawes, not that far away. There's not a big gap. There's a car width gap between the two buildings. I am so happy that the building was bought to be a family house, and it is going to be improved. That's wonderful. However, the extension over the side elevation and the back immediately and over 2 stories, so the height of it takes out all of the light that comes through to our bungalow. We're a semi-detached bungalow, and that is the only sort of form of light that comes in, because the other side is attached to a house. So the extent of the light pollution, or the fact that we won't get any light into our kitchen, and all we would be looking at is the black cladding over 2 stories, is just horrific. There would be no light, no personal privacy, and that's across the kitchen, bathroom, toilet, little bedroom. So all the light that comes into our house is from that side of the house, which is our main concern. The other concern is the black cladding. I'm so proud to live in the street Borden, and it is beautiful, and I don't think it's in keeping. I appreciate that's a personal opinion. And our 4 bungalows, they're red brick bungalows to start with, were built when the old vicarage was knocked down, and they have gargoyles on either side. And there's nothing about keeping the heritage or keeping the gargoyle. And again, I appreciate that's quite a personal opinion, but it completely changes the dynamics opposite the play stall of what those 4 bungalows are, to suddenly have this 2-story black building. Like I say, anything would be, or virtually anything would be, an improvement. And it is good to have a family home, but we don't want to lose all of our light. and see this black building. So we was hoping that, I know I can't make proposals or whatever, there would be some sort of compromise. So either a single story or didn't go so far back as to take out all the light that comes through to our house. That is the main thing that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Mike Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. The last one I'll speak on tonight, I promise. Yeah, I just really wanted to speak about the impact of the building. I know that the officers have said they think it would be an improvement. They like the design. Much as Councillor Hunt said on the last one, it's the design that's the problem. It isn't in keeping with the village. It doesn't enhance the appearance of that part of the conservation area, and that's the test that is required to enhance it. Officers might think that it does, but certainly in the views of local people, the local parish council, the local members, that's like me, it certainly does not enhance the look of the area. It shouldn't be too hard to come up with something that is more in keeping, less glass fronted, something that is more in keeping with the conservation area. But as it stands, this really is it isn't in keeping. It will have a jarring impact on the conservation area. So really, it's just a plea for reject this and ask them to come back with a more appropriate building for the conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I move the officer recommendation. Seconded, Councillor Martin. Thank you. Mr. Algar, could you help us on this a little bit in terms of conservation issues?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've not been too heavily involved in this one, but it was actually my colleague Jamil Kishore who provided the primary advice on this, but I'm very familiar with the area. As the lady who spoke a short while ago mentioned, there is a there is a sort of almost like a
Sorry, we can't hear, Mr. Could you?
There is a sort of composition of the properties opposite the play store, of which the application property forms one of those units. But having said that, it's not a particularly strong feature. It's certainly not heavily referenced in the recent conservation area appraisal. The property at the moment sort of has a fairly neutral effect on the conservation area in sort of in parallel with the other three bungalows. And I think whilst I can appreciate the concerns raised, the test is whether a proposal or proposed development would either preserve or enhance the character or conservation, the character appearance of the conservation area. I would possibly agree that it doesn't enhance the character, but I think it might be hard to make a case that it actually doesn't at least preserve the character, i.e. sort of has a neutral. Yes, it will be a change, but not necessarily a change for the better or the worse. I think it's just different, and that's not necessarily harmful in itself. It broadly preserves the essential scale of the building. It's really the materials that are changing, and as people who will live in the locality will know, there is quite a wide variety of different facing roof materials. Obviously, weatherboarding is quite a change from what it is at the moment, but it's not an out of character material for location per se. I struggle with this one to sort of see how we can sort of really legitimately refuse it, because I think the overall impact would be a fairly neutral one. in which case it would pass the test of preserve or enhance. So those are my thoughts on it. Not sure I can say very much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Great, thank you. Can we just pull up the picture of the front elevation of the new design bungalow, if it's possible, please?
Do you mean the photograph or the drawing?
The front elevation drawing.
Okay. Right, this is the rear elevation up here. That's the proposed front elevation. There's an existing front gable projection here, and what they're doing is lifting that up to a point just below the level of the new ridge line for the property, which would be raised by about 0.7 meters.
Okay, because at the moment what you've got is, I don't know, was it 5 bungalows set back with front gardens, quite front gardens, and then you've got what is quite, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Google Street Maps here as I talk so I can see it, but next to it is a quite attractive period building that looks like it's got a Kent peg tile roof. And it's got some really attractive windows with that sort of arch look within the frames, that sort of Pluckley almost look. And then we're going to end up with this new bungalow that is going to be taller, seems quite substantially taller, with the back cladding. And I hear what the speaker said earlier. I do have a great deal of sympathy there, because that does stand out. If you look at the local materials down that street, they're all some form of brick or a painted brick. And this is going to be quite a step change. I appreciate that this is, you know, developing this into something else, but actually I don't think this contributes to the conservation area. I heard what our conservation area officer said, and I don't think, it didn't seem like there was an entirely enthusiastic response. It doesn't help there's a great big telegraph pole sat in their front right on the street here, but actually if we're agreeing to something it has to be of good design, and I just think this will actually make, at the moment you have quite a cohesive settlement structure of bungalows set back, and this will completely break that. And it doesn't go with the neighbouring property. So I actually got a degree of sympathy here on design. If you look as well, the neighbouring property has a low rise sort of character garage next to the White House, and then you're going to have this tall front glass elevation. It really does jar.
Thank you. Councillor Winkler, please.
Thank you, Chair. If possible, can the officer put up the picture? I want to see exactly how close this proposed change to this property is close to the lady's property, next to the neighbouring property.
Right. Well, the gap between the two buildings will be 6.7 meters. The proposal will be about 4.5 meters removed from the boundary, and the neighbouring property is a further distance from the boundary, and the total gap between the two is approximately 6.7 meters. Does that help?
Yes, it's given me some idea seeing the visual picture again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just before I bring in Councillor Hunt, members, can I just have your indulgence for extending standing orders for 30 minutes, please?
Great.
Thank you, members. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. If the officer can just clarify what is what the rooms are next door. We heard the objector say about the loss of light to the kitchen, bedroom. Obviously, there is a concern. I think the distances are all acceptable in planning terms. But I do think back to applications we've had before, and not during this term, so members may not be aware, but I do remember one on Sheppey where we did look at refusing it because of loss of light, and at that time we was told that it was the impacts that it has. If it's a living room, then that harm is more so than if it was a kitchen or a room that's not used as much. So it'd just be good to get an idea of exactly what rooms there is going to be overshadowing, just to know what that impact is going to be. I personally, unless it is going to be a living room or a room that's used, I don't think we can be looking at it, refusing it on those grounds. But I do agree with the design of it. I think it looks like a Kent design that you would get with that black cladding throughout it, but it doesn't go in keeping with this area. I think there is something better that could come up. So if the officer can just clarify that point, and then I'll come back if that's all right.
Well, I don't think I can tell the committee exactly which rooms we're talking about. I think the main point is that there is a total gap of about 6.7 metres between the two properties, with the depth of the rear projection proposed being 4 metres, at which distance, regardless of which particular rooms we're talking about, the impact would normally be judged to be within acceptable tolerances. The other point I'd also just mention is that the application property does lie on the northern side of the neighbour, the bungalow to the south, and that does mean that the potential for loss of light and overshadowing is really very much more limited than would perhaps be the case elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Holt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can see what the officer's saying there. I think what we have had in the past is when there has been a concern of loss of light is something to show us actually where that, sort of try and sort of put that out into a plan to actually show that that's happening. And if we don't know what those rooms are, I think it's going to be difficult to say that what impacts that's going to be having. So I think we need some clarification of what those rooms are, where the light is going to be coming from, to be able to make that decision. So I hate to do it, but I do propose that we defer this, that in conjunction with the ward member, the design is looked at with officers and the applicant and the ward member to see if a better design can be achieved, and those concerns of light is looked at and brought back so we can have better understanding.
Thank you. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bonney. Those in favour of deferral? Those against? Abstentions? So that's 14 for and 1 against. Excellent. Remember, so we move on now to item 2.6 then, which is the last item. It's got public speakers on it, and I apologise to those speakers for having had to wait for quite such a long time this evening. And this one is 21/504388 full, and it's Woodland Farm, High Oak Hill, Iwade. And I thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's no updates for members, so everything is as per the committee report. This is an application for a permanent residential dwelling at Woodlands Farm, which is based on agricultural need. And the farm extends to 24 hectares and operates as an egg farm. It's got 2 very large poultry sheds housing approximately 28,000 chickens. And if you have a look on the plan that's on, I haven't put the plan on the screen. bear with me 2 seconds. Here we go. So if you have a look at the screen, this is one of the poultry sheds here. This is the road here and access into the site here. So you have a very large poultry shed here, and the second one, you have to go to the location plan to see it because the site's so large, but it is in that location there in blue. If you can see that on the screen. And permission was granted in 2010 originally for a mobile residential unit on the site for the farm manager, and was further extended in 2014. And that unit is located roughly here. And the permission was granted on the basis that there was an identified need for an on-site presence, and this remains the case today. And as is fairly common, as I'm sure a number of members will know, once a farm has established its business and operated successfully for a number of years and can demonstrate that it is viable to be able to construct a permanent dwelling, that is often what follows, and that is the application that we have in front of us. Business is well established, and the financial details provided demonstrate a profit and turnover to demonstrate that a permanent dwelling can be financially supported. The main consideration for officers has been the scale and potential visual impact of the dwelling. Concern was originally raised by the council's agricultural consultant about the size of the dwelling. I'll come on to the drawings now. So this is the siting of the proposed dwelling here. Sits closer to the site entrance than the mobile unit, which is currently over here. The key reason for that is for enhanced security presence by the site entrance. The proposed dwelling is a 2-storey unit, 4 bedrooms, and the elevations are as such here. Now, concern was originally raised by both the council and the council's agricultural consultant about the size of the unit, and following that, the unit has been reduced by a modest amount, albeit that it still remains a relatively large building. The applicants made the point that if you look at the floor plans, that there are elements of the unit which will be used for the operation of the business. So, for example, at ground floor level, you have a dining room come office area here, and you have a big boot room essentially on the side of the unit as well. So we've negotiated with the applicant to bring the size of the unit down. There were some lingering concerns which were, I suppose, largely based around how we've traditionally dealt with farm dwellings, and in particular in the context of old guidance in PPS 7, which is referred to in our local plan policy for agricultural dwellings. And that gave much more detailed advice than the NPPF now gives, and it included a requirement that the scale of the dwelling should be commensurate with the functional need of the farm, and there's much more emphasis on scale than is the case in the NPPF now. And taking that into account, as well as other decisions that have been made nationally on appeal by inspectors, and there's one in the report that's referred to, it's apparent that the issue of scale considered under the NPPF is possibly more flexible now than it has been in the past. Members will see that in paragraph 8.8 of the report, there is some detailed reference to that appeal decision, which was in Yorkshire. And that referred to some typical sizes for agricultural dwellings and standard 4-bed dwellings. And in this instance, we have a unit that is 212 square metres, so slightly larger than the standard dwelling and farm dwellings referred to in the appeal decision. But if you take into account the functional use of the ground floor for the operation of the farm, the actual living accommodation is potentially reduced to 168 square metres. Now, it's difficult to take that absolutely because you can't control quite how a dwelling is used and the individual rooms in the dwelling are used, but I think it's fair to give some flexibility that there will be some operational use of the dwelling connected to the business as well. So overall, we don't consider that the scale of the building, whilst large, is in itself a sustainable, or is in itself a reason that we could refuse the application, and we consider that based on the looser terms in the NPPF that this is acceptable. In terms of visual impacts, the site's in the open countryside and is on sloping and undulating land, which I can probably best show you if I bring up the pictures. So this is a picture taken from the site entrance. There's the access to the site here. You have a property called the Bungalow, which is here, and you've got mature landscaping, as you can see, along this verge here. As you come into the site, further on your left, you can see the mobile unit, which is here, and you can see one of the poultry sheds. This is the location which is between the mobile unit and the site entrance, where the dwelling is proposed, and the woods in the background are Wardwell Woods, which are ancient woodlands. And that's taken a little bit further back. So again, you can see the access site entrances around here, and the dwelling is proposed in this location here on the other side of the fence. That's a view looking back towards Newington area, and that's a view looking back towards the site entrance, and you can see the bungalow here. If I go back to the view back towards Newington, you can see how the land undulates, and this is on a relatively high point in the land. And if I just show members an aerial photo, which I think might be helpful. So this is the site here. Oh, sorry, this is the site of the dwelling here. You can see the poultry shed there. The second one's been built there. I've walked these footpaths here, this footpath here, and you can't see the site because of landscaping and topography. I've stood by the church here and looked across, and you can't get a view of the site. Appreciate that I'm looking when tree cover's at its best at the moment, but given the distance involved, despite the fact it's in an area of high landscape value, given that you've got the woods at the back of the site as a backdrop, and what appears to be the very limited visual or visibility of the site from public locations, we consider that to be acceptable. So it's a relatively balanced decision, but our view is that permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Harvey, please, to speak on this item? I apologise, yes, Iwade Road, sorry, yes.
Newington Parish Council objects to this application, which we see as almost manipulating legitimate purposes for a dream home that otherwise would never be permitted in this location. Had there been a clear proven agricultural and business case that even with 21st century technology, it was essential for the owner manager to permanently reside on the farm, there would have been little objection to a house built in the farm centre, replacing the current caravan. As the recommendation stands, condition 18, though standard wording, does not preclude the ownership of the house being separated from the farm in the future. There's a real prospect, we fear, of the future purchaser of the farm being unable to afford the house as well due to its scale and design. Then we get what we see elsewhere, farmhouses becoming country residences, with the farm then managed often remotely through technology. This application is on the very edge of the farm in what Kent Wildlife Trust term the, quote, irreplaceable habitat of ancient woodland and a local wildlife site. It's not in the farm centre, where the owner's chosen to site his caravan for the past 10 years, presumably seeing this then as the optimum position for running the farm. Instead, it's the optimum position for a dream house, but one that would be visible from the conservation area. And I take exception to the comments before, so I differ from the comments before, visible from the conservation area and any wider views from the village. Newington Parish Council's view is we do not begrudge the applicant their financial good fortune, which makes this proposed large and impressive house possible. We do begrudge the fact that in order to get a home with impressive views, the application would spoil the view, the visual amenity for everyone else, for anyone in the village looking at the hillside with its ancient woodland beyond the Newington Church conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Andrew Street, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing us to speak this evening. I'm speaking in support of the plan application for an agricultural workers dwelling at this site on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Steadman. The background to this case is Mr. and Mrs. Steadman have been farming this site since purchasing the land in 2010, which is now over 12 years ago. And in that time, they have grown a successful poultry business on the site. Initially, the farm housed 12,000 free-range chickens. In 2014, this council allowed for an increase in free-range chickens up to 28,000 chickens. The chickens are housed in 2 large poultry sheds. The applicant currently employs 3 local workers in addition to himself on the site. The farm currently supplies eggs for the supermarket chain Morrison's and also to local shops in the area. The proposal will provide a permanent agricultural workers dwelling on the site for the owner and his young family. The scheme also incorporates an office and a boot room washroom facility at ground floor level, as shown on the drawings, for the applicant and the workers to utilise. As the councillors will be aware, within the adopted local plan, there is a policy.
The meeting's still in progress.
Policy DM12 that allows a permanent agricultural workers and managers accommodation in the rural area. This proposal complies with that plan policy. As mentioned, the applicant has been residing at the farm since 2010 in a temporary mobile home, which is now in need of considerable refurbishment and repair. Facilities in this temporary accommodation are basic, and the family has long outgrown the mobile home, which will be removed as part of this proposal. We have worked closely with the councillors, with the council's case officer and agricultural advisor on this scheme. The advisor has accepted the functional and financial test we have put forward. The functional test is needed for the property, is accepted for animal welfare reasons, as Mr. Steadman needs to closely monitor the poultry sheds, and we have submitted evidence in the form of business accounts for the past 4 years and beyond to show the business is profitable. Therefore, we have a clear need and justification for a permanent dwelling on the site. The proposal does not harm the ancient woodland to the north of the site, and we have agreed to make the necessary financial SAM contribution to the North Kent Marshes Ramsar site. The recommended conditions are acceptable to the applicant, including the occupancy condition and the need for vehicle charging points and the requirement to reduce the building dwelling emission rate in line with the council's guidance. In summary, we request that the planning committee approve this proposal this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Could I invite Councillor Horton, please, to speak on this item? You might need to unmute yourself, Councillor Horton. Yeah,
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I've got you now. Thank you.
Okay, headphones aren't working. I'll try and do it the other way.
Only kidding. No, you're muted again. Well, we can't hear you, Councillor Horton. Dear, oh dear. Yeah, we've got to do it, yeah. Right, Councillor Horton, we've had plenty of fun. We're now going to move over to Councillor Palmer for him to do his speak, and we'll come back to you if we may. Mr. Attaway, if you could sort that one for us in the meantime, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw attention to page 179 of the report, point 41. I'd like the committee to consider exceptional circumstances, because the committee needs to decide if this application meets the certain exceptional circumstances, such as for the provision of agricultural workers accommodation. I don't believe this application satisfies this test. I feel if you need to look after the chickens at this site, I feel it could be done by remote monitoring. A lot have changed in that period of time in the 12 years since the application was approved. The recent pandemic has highlighted that remote monitoring solutions are more beneficial than ever, particularly with examples being bird flu. Access to key information such as water and food intake will be fundamental in improving efficiencies in health, welfare and performance of the chickens going forward. The applicant could have remote monitoring and houses are available locally within the built-up confines of the local villages nearby. The officer's report, the main issue to consider in my view is whether a particular dwelling proposed is appropriate, having regards to the role of the dwelling that would be restricted to agricultural occupancy. I don't think it meets that test of an exceptional circumstances. Does the applicant need to be in sight and sound of the livestock, meaning the dwelling was an operational essential and not merely a convenient? If this isn't the case, then it is merely convenient. DM3 notes, amongst others, that developments for rural-based employment must, for new buildings and ancillary facilities, the design and layout will need to be sympathetic to the rural location and appropriate in their context. I don't think this meets that test. Policy DM12 provides exceptions to this where dwellings are proposed for rural workers. However, it requires applicants to demonstrate that there is clear functional need for the workers to live on site, such as farm workers carrying out livestock and visiting livestock during the night. I don't see any evidence of this. And there are being no other suitable existing dwellings available nearby, or they are. Planning permission was granted for a new permanent rural workers dwelling will be granted, subject to there being clearly existed essential need for the proper function of the enterprise for a full-time worker and to be readily available at most times. I don't feel this has been demonstrated. I feel this is mainly a home based on family need, not on the need of the workplace. And I feel that remote monitoring could be a solution to this. Thank you. I will add that I think the officer's report was very well put together and it's a finely balanced decision, but I do feel that it's trying to get a house where it wouldn't normally be approved.
Thank you. I move the officer recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Members, any Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. When I saw this, I must say I was concerned with the scale of the size of this. But I think officers have seen all the documentation and have come up with the conclusion that it should be approved. And I would go with officers on that. I did again have concern the scale of it and what impacts it has, especially because it is a high landscape value area. But from what Mr. Burns said there, he's looked and taken that into account when he's looking around, and I think again that's sort of taking his point of view on that. I think is the right thing to do. I do think we need to take that whilst this is for a farm worker, I think it will at some point end up as a dwelling in the countryside. And I would like to have pushed it a bit more to try and get it up to paragraph 80 and trying to push a bit more out of it and try to get something. But I think we're in a position where it is only at this time a farm dwelling and for the business, and I think it will need to be approved.
Thank you. Members, anybody else? Any comments, observations? Councillor Bonney?
I'd actually quite like to see, I think, this location, because this all hinges on its setting. And I think if you ask the man on the street, is that a farm worker's house? I think they'd probably laugh at you, quite honestly. You know, we have to take it in a context of, is this truly innovative, reflective of the highest design standards, and significantly enhance its immediate setting? Well, the immediate setting is rural countryside. Does that enhance rural countryside? I'm not utterly convinced. I think perhaps I need to see it, and I don't know what other committee members think.
Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very sympathetic to the need for accommodation on site, and I think that if the farmer has proved that he's developed a viable business, I don't think it's reasonable to expect him to continue to live in a mobile home. And I'm not convinced that actually mobile monitoring is the answer. There's a lot of poultry here involved, so I think it does need something on site. But I agree with Councillor Bonney that this is more like a family home, as it were, rather than on farm accommodation. I'm not suggesting that it should be a 1-bedroom cottage, but I do think the scale is larger than I think we would normally accept in the countryside. So I'm kind of split. I'm in favour of accommodation, but not this particular dwelling.
Thank you, members. I need to beg your indulgence, please, for a further extension to standing orders. It's 10:25. Thank you, Councillor Bonney, please.
Yeah, could the officer point me to where the condition is for external lighting? Because, you know, this is a substantial house. I just want to make sure it's not then lit like a Belisha beacon in the middle of the countryside.
This is going on 10:30. For Christ's sake.
Well, I don't immediately spot it, so I think the answer is it's not there. And clearly, if members are minded to grant permission, then certainly that condition can be included, so we control details of external lighting.
So I'll propose that if someone wants to second that.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Simmons seconding. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Could I just come back? Is there a condition on agricultural occupancy?
Yeah. Councillor Bate, please.
Yeah, I think the two most important conditions that I got out of this were 18 and 19. Firstly, the occupation for agricultural use, and then also the removal of any permitted development rights to be able to extend it. I think both of those are spot on. I'm taking a slightly different view to the previous speakers, that for a established farm of this sort of size, I don't think that is necessarily out of keeping. I'm not looking at it as farm workers accommodation. I'm looking at it as the farmer and his family's accommodation. And I can think of several farms on the island that have got houses of that size. Some of them no longer operating and now converted into expensive niche B&Bs, an example. But I do think that's quite a standard size for a working farm. As Mr. Burns set out, when you actually look at the living space, when you take out the working farm office, and that boot room is huge on the front of the property, or was it on the side? Yeah, but so once you take that out, the actual living space of this property, and I take it on face value that this is going to be his and his family's home to work that farm forevermore. The only question that I had, and it doesn't necessarily affect how I'm going to vote, but as far as I can tell, the permission to live on that farm has expired.
Correct.
Councillor Martin, please.
I really don't want to have to repeat what's been said, but actually in terms of a dwelling, Councillor Bate is on the money. It might not be, we're not looking at a dwelling for somebody who works for a farmer. We are looking at a farmer's dwelling, and actually the design looks very much similar to many other farmhouses you will see in dairy and poultry farms across Kent. I think it's actually quite well done, particularly if they're going to achieve the 50% over environmental building regs. So I fully support this. I think it's the right thing to do. I know it's been mentioned about the idea of remote watching. That also relies on strong, good quality rural broadband, which we know we don't have across the borough. So it makes sense. The officers are satisfied from the financial point of view and the need to be on site. I think they've got this bang on, and I will be supporting them on it.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just
I forgot you were with us this evening.
okay, yeah. I try to be quiet. I do get quiet sometimes. Just a minor point. Most of the farmhouses I've seen, they've built these lovely farmhouses, usually in bold, the existing farmhouse in a different location having to be demolished. So do I take it that the existing temporary arrangement will be removed and not used?
Yeah, there's a condition there that requires the mobile unit to be removed. I think it's within 3 months of occupation of the dwelling. Can I also add as well that if members are minded to approve this on the basis that it's acceptable as essentially the house to the farm rather than agricultural workers accommodation in general, it is possible, if members think it's necessary, to secure a Section 106 agreement that ties the dwelling to the land itself as well. So that's a consideration that members might want to think about.
I'll propose that. Someone can second that.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Can I have a second there? Councillor Hunt, thank you. Those in favour? Unanimous again, thank you. So if you could, Mr. Byrne. Right, back to the substantive, with the amendments, of course. Motion on the floor. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? 13. Those against? 2. And any abstentions? Okay, so permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice.
So, sorry, can I just check, was the lighting, external lighting?
Yes.
Yes, please. Yes. Oh, yes, indeed. Right, members, we do have item 2.2, 2.5 and 3.1. We're probably going to struggle to get them knocked out by 11, but we can certainly have a try to just your desire. Councillor Peart?
Yeah, I agree with that. What I don't want is what we did last time, where we left over some items and then we came back and knocked it out in an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
When we could have done it that evening.
Yeah. Okay. Let's crack on. You've done it now. Okay, then that's fine. Right. So, members, the next one then is item 2.2. And this is 21/505936 full, and it's erection. It's 19 to 21 Mountfield, Queenborough. It's been removed, Tim. Yeah. You obviously didn't get the email. Ah. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just check for updates. I do have a verbal update actually on this one. When I get there, not too many cases. Yeah, so we've received further comments from the Environmental Health Officer, and they recommend a condition is imposed to require acoustic protection measures in relation to the proximity of the unit to the railway line. That seems reasonable and necessary, so I'd recommend that a condition is worded to that effect and added to the list of recommended conditions. The application itself, it's a slightly odd one. Permission was granted back in 2006 for development of 14 units on the land that is now known as Mountfield. And the 3 units in question, which sit relatively centrally, it's quite a narrow site, and it's got a number of rows of units that sit at right angles to the railway line, which is here. The 3 units in question, 19 to 21, were built, well, the whole development was built, but these 3 units in question were built and then essentially deemed unfit for purpose. The agent has advised that was on the grounds that the timber frame to the dwellings had failed, and that the buildings needed to be not be knocked down for that reason. And the council granted a demolition permission for demolition back in 2019. And the application that we now have is essentially, give or take a couple of very small changes for the same development that existed on the site previously. So what we have is a 3-storey terrace. It's got an integral garage, 1 parking space out the front. Each unit provides 3 bedrooms, and you can see that partly the first floor is integrated into the roof space. The only difference, really, the only material difference between this scheme and the houses that were previously built on the site is that a small lean-to rear extension has been added to the back of the properties. But essentially, they are more or less identical to the units on site. And we have a look at the photos. I mean, this is obviously the site boarded up here. Those are the units at the back, which you can see are very much in the same vein of design and scale to what's now proposed. That's on the other side of the access way. Not quite sure what that one is. We'll skip that one and maybe that one as well. And here we go. So if you have a look here, this is looking sort of towards the estate. You can see you've got 2 units here. There's the site in there, and then you've got the units that we saw a closer picture of a couple of minutes ago. In terms of design and scale and impact, as far as we're concerned, it's exactly the same as was granted originally in 2006, 2007. We consider that to be acceptable. The Town Council had raised concern regarding flooding and sewage issues. The Environment Agency raised no objection. The applicant did submit a revised flood risk assessment, which was updated, which dealt with some initial concerns there. And in terms of sewage, Southern Water have raised no objection to the application. So our recommendation is to approve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree with the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I went and viewed the site a couple of days ago. It's exactly as you've just shown. There's nothing, no difference sort of as it's been described to us. So buildings have been removed. What's going back is virtually like for like. And I don't see there's anything further to discuss. The issues about the sewages generally in that area are not anything to do with these houses as it happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bate, please.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to disagree. So when Mr. Burns said that this has an interesting history, it certainly does. When these houses were taken over and demolished, it was taken over by the NHBC, the National House Building Council, because the houses have been condemned. They were demolished. What concerns me is anyone who knows the history of this site. When it was first built, obviously it was not built to an adoptable standard, and you can see from the officers' pictures that several years down the line now it looks an awful state where it hasn't been looked after. I just wanted to read, and I'm shocked and appalled at Southern Water's comments on this, and I completely concur with the Town Council's view, because I just wanted to read here. The residents were left for 4 months with their properties only able to get drinking water from a standpipe outside. Southern Water wrote to the affected homes in January to warn them not to drink from their taps due to a risk of contamination, and had to pump 9,000 gallons of sewage out from one of the garages. I'm perplexed that we can have a response from Southern Water and the Environment Agency that there is not an issue with flooding here. It was built with an inadequate pumping station, which is still serving the properties that are there. I would like, I'm not going to go for refusal. I think this is something that needs to be brought back and properly investigated, because there's a reason those houses were demolished and why the NHBC had to step in. And just putting another 3 back on that plot doesn't solve the issues. All we're doing is condemning another 3 families to a poor way of living.
Okay, Councillor Bonney.
Is that a proposal, Councillor?
Well, I thought we had a new chair for a minute.
Well,
Is that
a little
proposal?
prompt
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's extremely rare the NHBC actually step in and take such action. If that's the case, I think we need to go back to our statutory consultee here and get some clarity on the situation. I don't think we, as an authority, can ignore that. Now it's been brought before us. So I wholeheartedly support.
Okay, so that
Councillor
gives
Betts.
the formal deferral for those reasons, seconded by Councillor Bonney. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. So obviously that one is now deferred. Yeah, sorry.
So just a matter of clarification, and to Councillor Beer, the issue with the neighbours and their garages, is that relating to sewage flooding as opposed to, there's nothing relating obviously to wider flooding? It is flooding from the existing drains, presumably.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and this area of Queenborough has issue with drains flooding anyway, but this area in particular.
So given that it relates to drainage, the Environment Agency wouldn't be involved if it goes to a main system. So if we get in contact with Southern Water to unearth what the issue is there, then
Yeah.
With the drains was what they did. The original builders did an illegal connection, and that's what caused all the problems. I've assumed that was always rectified a few years ago. So
we'll have it checked. Okay, members, we come on to item 2.5 then, which is 22/501387 full. Page number 173. And it's 2 All Saints View, Sea Salter Road, Graveney, Faversham. I'll read the full address this time and I won't get rebuked. Here he comes.
Right, just have to load the plans. Right, are you able to hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. This is a fairly simple application for a vehicle drop curb. The Highway Authority is happy with the proposal, but the Parish Council isn't, largely on the grounds that the site doesn't have the capacity to allow a vehicle to enter in and exit in forward gear. It suggests that if vehicles were allowed to, I think, reverse over a walkway at the side, then it would indeed be possible. But you know, that is not really something that should be encouraged. The Highway Authority takes the view that there is a benefit to be had here, insofar as it would remove a parked car from the road, and the proposed arrangement is no different from that which the adjoining property currently has, which does obviously involve vehicles reversing out onto the road. So they take the view that the highway impact is within acceptable tolerances. They clearly understand that there is a hazard as a result of vehicles reversing out, but this needs to be seen in the context of a vehicle being parked on the road being removed. And further point is that if people have to reverse out onto the road, of course, they would be naturally cautious, and against all that background, they take the view that the proposal is acceptable.
Thank you. I move the House recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bonney, thank you. Members, any observations, comments? Councillor Winkles.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just quickly, I do have some concerns about if we was minded to pass this tonight, reversing out onto the road. Can you give us a picture of the road to see the visibility of it?
Well, it's a classified road which has a fairly straight alignment. There is good visibility in both directions. And my own view is that the natural inclination of people doing that manoeuvre will be naturally cautious. I think it would be a difficult position for the council to take a contrary view to the highway authority on this matter, but on its merits, my own view is that it's not unacceptable either.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'll take this one to the vote then, please. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? Those against? And abstentions? So that is carried. Permission granted subject to the issue of decision notice. We now move on to item 3.1, which is 22/501078/ and this is Cripps Farm, Plough Road, Minster-on-Sea, Sheerness, Kent, ME12 4JH.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to have to be super quick here because I've just had a low battery warning on my laptop.
I've had one on my body.
This site is on the north side of Plough Road in Minster/East Church, and is in the open countryside. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Permission was granted a few years ago for an extension to the property and this triple garage in this location. And essentially the boundary line to the residential courtesy of the property follows along here behind the garage. It's an open boundary in reality, but the residential element is there and the wider land to the rear is agricultural land. The application that we have is retrospective. If I zoom in here to give members a better view, what they will see has happened is that the garage hasn't been built where it should have been, which is here, and has been built here. And the application has been made for retrospective permission for the garage and effectively a change of use of the land to include it within the residential curtilage. The garage itself is slightly bigger than the garage that was previously granted. The council, obviously, you'll see that officers are recommending refusal. Couple of issues to highlight to members. Firstly, if the development's within the boundary of residential boundary of the site, you know, our view is within reason in the countryside, some outbuildings can be acceptable. And we have policy DM11, which although it isn't exclusive, it doesn't exclusively refer to outbuildings, it gives support for extensions to dwellings in the countryside. This isn't within the residential curtilage, so our view is that it doesn't gain any support under DM11. We do have as well a policy on extending gardens to properties in rural areas. That is caveated in supporting text to say that if we are to grant permission, the scheme needs to be sensitively designed and well landscaped and not harm the character or appearance of the countryside or landscape in any particular way. And the supporting text also states that we would normally remove permitted development rights to stop buildings from being erected on the land. We think this fails both tests. A, obviously there's a building there, and B, our view is this is basically a highly contrived scheme, essentially to deal with where the garage has been built. There's no landscaping around it, and our view is it's unnecessary encroachment into the countryside that's not supported by policy. So essentially our recommendation is to refuse. I should have said at the start as well, I think members have probably all received an email from Mr. Booth, who I think circulated, stroke lobbied members earlier. I've been sent that as well, and members will be aware of his comments on it, but our view is that this is unacceptable. Thank you. I shall show some photos as well.
Thank you. You just stole my thunder. I was just about to mention that you'll be circulating an email. Right, I move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bonney, thank you. Councillor Hunt, you're first up.
Chair. I remember this application well from the past, and other members may do. I think it just came into the new year after elections. As you can see, that it says on there the past history. There is a lot of history on this site, and the applicant at the time, we overturned it as a committee to get what should have been built approved. And the applicant, I think, knows full well what should and shouldn't be being done. And I fully support the officers on this one to go out and build the garage completely outside of the boundary of the dwelling is not on. And I say refuse this and be looking at taking enforcement action.
Thank you. Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in very much two minds about this one. As Councillor Hunt said, the first time we looked at this, I think it was prior to the elections, and the garage was originally proposed to be at the front of the house, with the back of the garage facing down the hill to Plough Road. And we completely said, we agreed with the officers that that was unacceptable. As you came up the lane, it's the first big brick thing you would see on top of the hill, and it is quite a drop there. The applicant came back with a revised scheme where he moved the garage into the back garden, and I think officers still recommended it for refusal, and it was overturned. I'm disappointed that we've got to this stage where we worked with them, got them something that officers weren't necessarily happy with, but we took us on a balance. And then retrospectively, they've gone and done something different. Looking at the drawings, whilst the garage is slightly larger, I actually prefer the design. I think the double garage looks nicer than the triple garage that was proposed. But if you look at the history, there's two other pending decisions at the moment. One of those is a retrospective application for erection of an agricultural barn, which I think is also, you could see on one of those photos that was put up. So I am very much in two minds. If I was looking at this as a new application, as in there was no history, where it's actually cited, I think is better for the neighbouring resident because it's no longer against their boundary. It's now set slightly back. And when you look at the comments from the neighbouring resident, they haven't objected, but they've made several comments about the design, etc., and they've asked for certain conditions to be applied. And secondly, it also lessens the impact of what you'll be able to see from the road. It's set further back. All you will see is the main house. So I am still very much on the fence. Unfortunately, if you look at that design, the fence isn't where it's supposed to be. But as you can see, the landowner does own a significant portion of land there. And it's us deciding where the boundary of the housing property, where the property is, the curtilage of the property, and then the surrounding area. I'm not certain. I'm not seeing many people saying they're going to speak on this, so I'm not sure I'm going to have a decision by the time we get to the vote.
Councillor Marchington, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've had the gentleman on to me and we've had some discussions. We had trouble with boundaries with him before. This one, I feel is instantly on the attack. I've got 10 acres, you know, as if like he can do what he wants, and it gets very aggressive. But it's almost, this is so far back into the garden, it's almost like it's going to become part of the other plot where he wants to put the barn. And that's I can't really say that, but I'm at the view that I'm preconceived, so I won't vote on this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, I don't see anybody else indicating, so we'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for refusal? That's 9. Those against? 1. Oh, 2. Any abstentions? Oh, sorry, abstention. So 1 refuse, 1 against, sorry, and 1 abstention. Okay, and finally, the part 5s. I think I'll just jump in there if I may, and the officers obviously done a cracking job there because all 3 we won. So it's do we not? Apart obviously the
no significantly
sorry,
we didn't.
No, sorry, the one at Upchurch.
Significantly, we didn't win Spade Lane.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Did you,
that's
sorry?
what I meant. Yes, yeah. But the others were obviously fine. But yes, Councillor Hunt, please.
5-2.
Yeah.
It is a strange. It took me a while to try and work out what had actually happened there. But I completely understand where the appeal came from. I just do find it surprising that as a council, we probably took council tax from a property which shouldn't have actually been there anyway. But I just, yeah, that's all I've got to say on that one. It's strange.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just check if we've got a date for the. So the planning working group meeting then for the Burntwick at Upchurch is Monday, the 11th of July. Or it can be Tuesday, the 12th of July. Any time this week would be really helpful. 11th or 12th? 10 a.m. Yeah. Right, Tuesday the 12th. Everybody, can we make that one? Right, 11th. Let's see your hands for the 11th. 12th. So it looks like we're gonna go on 11th, or Monday you can go on the 12th and have your on-site meeting there. Okay, so it's Monday, the 11th of July. Thanks, members. Thanks for your forbearance. And as I say, it's been a long old session, just for a change.